Chapter 693. Dean turned and rushed to the end of the corridor to stop the other three people who were running away in panic. They were wearing the same white coat as the previous middle-aged man. One of them was wearing a thin, dust-proof glove. He kicked the wall next to him. Bang! The wall was kicked and a hole appeared. The ferocious force scared the three of them. They didn't dare to move. "Which one of you is a doctor?" Dean asked in a cold voice. The three of them looked at each other. They didn't know Dean's purpose and didn't know how to answer. Dean glanced at the work cards on their chests. He didn't see the title of doctor. Where is the doctor? If you speak, then you will live. If you don't speak, then you will die. We are in the Monster Research Institute. Who are you? One of the people in the middle courageously questioned Dean, but his face was pale and it seemed that he was powerless. Bang! Dean's fist hit the man's head. The man's skull was broken and his brain burst. His body shook a little, and then he fell down. The headless body leaned on the shoulder of a middle-aged man in his 50s. The man's coat was wet from the gushing blood, and he softly slid to the ground. Both of them trembled in fear. They almost didn't dare to breathe as they looked at Dean in horror. The man on the right immediately responded, I'll speak. I'll speak. Don't kill me. The doctor is on the 8th floor. Don't kill me. The man on the left also woke up and hurriedly said, The doctor is down there. It's none of our business. Don't kill me. Dean turned and kicked the man's waist. The man's body hit the wall. The wall cracked. The middle-aged man's body was embedded in the wall. The organs in his abdomen were squeezed by the huge force. Blood gushed out of his orifices. He died on the spot. Dean ignored the man on the right and quickly ran back to Aisha. He took her hand and stomped on the ground. Bang! The corridor split open. Both Dean and Aisha fell to the 7th floor underground. Researchers in white coats were running out of the corridors and rooms on the 7th floor. 4 or 5 armored attendants were running towards Dean from the end of the corridor. They were running in the opposite direction of the crowd. Dean ignored him and grabbed a bald middle-aged man. Where's the doctor? I don't know. The middle-aged man was panic-stricken. Dean was too lazy to talk nonsense. He swung his body and threw it towards the attendant. He stamped his feet again, and the floor cracked. He and Aisha fell to the 8th floor underground. There were 2 or 3 figures in white coats walking in the corridor. They were in a hurry, but they weren't panicking. They heard the sudden cracking sound and looked back. They saw Dean and Aisha landing on the ground. The expressions of the 3 changed as they hurriedly ran forward. Dean's figure flashed as he quickly caught up with the 3. Is the doctor? As he spoke, he glanced at the work passes on their chests and noticed that one of them wasn't wearing a work pass. He looked like a leader. The faces of the other 2 changed as they heard Dean's words. They subconsciously looked at the person in the middle, but quickly retracted their eyes. One of them straightened his chest. Who are you? How dare you attack our Monster Research Institute? Aren't you afraid that His Majesty will kill you? Your colleague has already said the same thing, and now he's dead. Dean's eyes fell on the old man in the middle who looked about 60 years old. Are you the doctor? The old man's face slightly changed. I'm just an assistant. I'm not a doctor. Dean coldly snorted as he kicked the knee of the man who was talking. The man's knee was broken. The broken bone pierced the skin behind the knee. The man fell to the ground and screamed in pain. The other 2 didn't expect Dean to suddenly attack. They raised their hands to stop him, but didn't dare to. Dean grabbed the man's hair, and the other hand grabbed his arm. Who is the doctor? The man's face was full of pain as he kept screaming. He ignored Dean's words. Dean's nails pierced deep into the man's shoulder. He repeated, Who is the doctor? The man screamed miserably. He was in so much pain that he wanted to die. Dean tore off the man's arm. Blood spurted out and splashed on the pants of the old man in the middle. He repeated, Who is the doctor? The man opened his eyes in horror as he looked at Dean's calm face. It was as if he was looking at a devil. He trembled. I don't know. Dean's fingers crossed the man's chest. His sharp nails easily cut through the man's unprotected overalls, exposing the skin on his chest. His fingernails passed through the man's chest like a knife, cutting a blood mark. His fingers grabbed the edge of the blood mark and tore it. The man screamed like a pig. His whole body twitched and he almost fainted from the pain. "Who is the doctor?" Dean repeated. The man was in so much pain that he couldn't hear Dean's words. The old man in the middle saw such a bloody scene. His face turned ugly. "Stop. I am a doctor. What are you going to do?" "You are." Dean stopped and looked at the old man. Judging from his appearance and temperament, he did have some guesses and doubts. But even if he admitted it, he may not believe his words. He said, "Take me to your personnel file management office. I want to see your identity information." The old man's face changed as he hesitated. Dean narrowed his eyes as he looked at the youth on the right who was trembling in fear. "If you don't want to learn from him, then you lead the way." He released the youth who had been tortured half to death. The young man trembled slightly. He looked at the old man next to him. He hesitated for a moment and said to Dean, "I'll take you there. Don't hurt me." He made a gesture to lead the way. Dean grabbed the old man and said, "You follow me." The old man's face turned ugly. He didn't dare to resist as he followed the young man. The files were on the 3rd underground floor. Dean took Aisha with one hand and took the two of them along the stairs to the 3rd underground floor. Along the way, they met the attendants stationed on each floor who came to intercept them. They were all killed by him. These attendants were weaker than the 8 senior Lemeters outside. They were not his opponents at all. The two people who were held hostage by Dean became more and more desperate as the guards were killed. The young man found the archive room. "I don't know the password of the door." Dean didn't finish his words as he kicked the heavy metal door. "Now I know." Dean went in and saw a lot of files on shelves. He said to the young man, "I'll give you 2 minutes to find the doctor's file." The young man's face turned pale. He knew that there was no room for bargaining. He hurried to the shelf and rummaged through the files. He found a sealed file. He handed it to Dean. "This is the file of the Polish doctor." Dean opened the file and glanced at it. There was no portrait, but the body information was recorded. Age 72, height 167, from the noble Pomi family. He quickly finished reading and turned to look at the old man. His face was slightly cold as he said, "You are not the Polish doctor. Where is the real doctor?" The old man clenched his fists. "I won't tell you. You won't find a Polish doctor." A cold light flashed in Dean's eyes as his pupils contracted. The world in front of him immediately became clear. He saw that most of the people in the institute had escaped to the ground. But there were 3 people who were surrounded by 4 other people who were running in another direction. "You want to escape?" Dean coldly snorted and threw out the file in his hand. The compressed paper ball hit the old man's throat, and the sound of bones breaking echoed. The old man's mouth was wide open. He looked at Dean in horror and staggered back. The young man next to him shivered and didn't dare to support him. Dean held Aisha's hand and chased after the old man. "Doctor, hurry up, hurry up." The short young man looked at the Polish doctor who was panting behind him anxiously. The Polish doctor was out of breath. His face was red, and his forehead was covered in sweat. He said, "I can't take it anymore. I need a rest. My feet hurt." The short young man jumped up. "Doctor, I will carry you. They will catch up if you don't hurry up." Chapter 694. The short youth was about to open his mouth when his pupils shrank. He looked up and saw 2 shadows approaching from behind. He could feel the murderous aura coming from them. Not good. They're catching up. The short youth panicked. He had seen how these 2 killed his companions. He knew that they couldn't resist them. He pushed the doctor away. "Doctor, run away. We will stop them." Poland's face changed as he noticed Dean chasing after him. He wanted to run forward, but his legs were sore and he was panicking. He almost stumbled and fell down. At this moment, Dean had caught up. He saw the appearance of the old man surrounded by several people. Compared with the information on the file, the age and height were basically the same. He didn't hesitate anymore. He shook the bell and rushed over with Aisha. "Doctor, run away." The short youth roared as he pulled out his knife to meet Dean. Aisha roared as she rushed out. Her speed was faster than Dean. She knocked the short youth to the ground and tore off his arm. Dean went to kill the others. They knew that they couldn't escape, so they tried to resist. Poland and the other 2 researchers in white coats panicked and supported each other as they desperately ran forward. The fight ended in a few minutes. Dean and Aisha caught up with Poland. He jumped in front of the three and said, "Doctor, you are tired, so take a break." Bolin looked at him in horror. He forced himself to calm down and gasped. "Who are you? Do you know the crime of attacking our Monster Research Institute? No matter who is behind you, they'll be found out." Dean said in a cold voice, "Talk less if you don't want to suffer. You won't die as long as you are obedient." Bolin's face alternated between green and white as he thought. "What exactly do you want from me?" "I want to make a hunter tool." Dean wasn't afraid to expose his thoughts. "I'll let you live after I finish." Bolin was startled for a moment. Then he understood why the two of them didn't plunder the Research Institute's materials and experimental data, but wanted to catch him. He calmed down a little, gritted his teeth, and said, "I can't make the demon hunter tool alone. It's useless even if you catch me." "So you are worthless?" Poland's face changed. "I didn't mean that. I just want you to stop killing innocent people. If you want me to help you make a hunter tool, then please let my friend go." "Doctor has a good heart," Dean said in a cold voice. "Don't worry about your friend. You can rest assured that everything is fine as long as you are obedient." Poland was relieved, but he felt a little strange. Those who could make the demon hunting tool were big forces like the Witcher family or some noble above the Baron rank. Even if such forces didn't need to kidnap him, as long as they placed an order, the Demonic Creature Research Institute would tailor it for them. Why would they take such a big risk to attack the Institute? He had a trace of doubt about Dean's identity, but he didn't show it in his heart. Dean's mind was sharp. He guessed Poland's thoughts from his eyes. He didn't care. "Let's go back to the Institute. I want to visit your Institute." Poland was surprised. "Do you want to go back?" "Why? Don't you want to go back?" Dean asked. Poland quickly replied, No. He didn't expect that Dean wouldn't take the opportunity to kidnap him as soon as possible after attacking the Institute. Wasn't he worried that their reinforcements would come? However, going back to the Institute was good for him. He hoped that Dean would stay as long as possible. Dean took the three of them back to the Institute. The place was empty. Almost all the staff had left under the escort of the guards. Dean asked, "What is your Institute research on? Do you study undead?" Poland couldn't guess Dean's thoughts. "We generally study all kinds of monsters. Undead is a kind of monster. Although they were human, but they are infected by the virus. There is no difference between them and monsters." Dean casually asked, "Is there a way to treat them if they are infected?" Bolin was slightly startled. He glanced at him and pondered for a moment before asking, "Are your relatives infected?" He thought about yesterday's outbreak of the plague. Many people in the city were infected. If Dean's relatives were infected, then he would take the risk to attack the Institute to find an antidote. Dean didn't deny, "Is there a way?" Then he put away his relaxed look and stared into his eyes. Poland's heart slightly trembled. He was nervous as Dean stared at him. If it is an initial infection, then the infected tissue can be removed. But if the infection is deep and the virus spreads to the heart, then it will be more troublesome. But there is still a glimmer of hope. What if the whole body is infected, including the brain? Dean stared at him. Poland's muscles couldn't help but tighten as he asked. Poland was startled. "Are you saying that they have been infected and turned into an undead? How is it? Basically, there is no cure." Poland swallowed his throat, feeling that it was a bit difficult to speak. When he finished speaking, he suddenly felt that the temperature around him seemed to have suddenly dropped. It was bone-piercing cold, and there was an inexplicable feeling of panic and trembling. This feeling came from the eyes of the youth in front of him. It was an extremely cold gaze, filled with endless killing intent and infinite madness. However, it gave people a strange sense of calmness, like a frozen tornado. "What do you mean by basically there is no cure?" Dean's voice was a bit hoarse. He clenched his fists so hard that his bones made cracking sounds. His footsteps stopped as he stared at Poland's face. Poland's heart was pounding. He reluctantly moved his eyes away. Undead's consciousness has basically dissipated. It is no different from death. We have been studying how to solve this problem, but the progress has been slow. No, but there was a prophet who proposed the concept that if we can reunite the consciousness, then we can restore the undead to human form. Reunite the consciousness. Dean grasped the glimmer of hope. He pressed his hands on Poland's shoulders. How? Chapter 695. Dean's heart sank as he heard Poland's words. What was consciousness? What was the soul? Such questions couldn't be answered even in the old era. Even the world that had produced nuclear weapons couldn't analyze the human soul. In this barren and backward world, it was out of reach to peek into the depths of the soul. Is there no other way? Dean stared at Poland for a moment. Poland smiled. This is the only feasible method at present, but it will take at least hundreds of years of development to implement it. The current research is unable to explore such a deep level. If we can find important information from the era outside the giant wall, then science can make a big leap. Maybe it will shorten the time. Dean was silent. It was possible to touch on the soul research after hundreds of years of development. But would he still be alive after hundreds of years? There was silence in the corridor. Poland looked at Dudien's silent appearance. His heart was perturbed. From Dudien's question, he was basically sure that the teenager's motive for attacking the Monster Research Institute might be related to the undead plague. Perhaps the attack on the institute wasn't planned by the forces behind the teenager, but he had taken the initiative to find a way to rescue his loved ones. This was the only explanation he could think of. After all, there shouldn't be any forces in the inner wall that would attack the Monster Research Institute. Dean calmed down after a long time of silence. Even if what the doctor said was true, there was no other way. At least there was a glimmer of hope. He could use the knowledge from the super chip to develop the biological technology as soon as possible. Maybe he could find a way to reunite the consciousness. The super chip contained all the core technology of the old era, but even in the old era, it had not explored the mystery of consciousness. It was too inefficient for him to study it alone. If he spread the knowledge in it, it would increase the horizons and knowledge of other alchemists and doctors in the Monster Research Institute. With the help of the masses, the speed of research in this area would definitely be greatly improved. Dean also learned from Poland that a lot of the knowledge of the inner wall was obtained from the ruins outside the giant wall. This knowledge could promote the technological circle of the inner wall. The super chip was undoubtedly the most complete and comprehensive knowledge base. It was enough to promote the technological circle. After all, there were many geniuses in this era. If they were given the corresponding knowledge, then it wouldn't be impossible to study the mystery of the soul. However, all of this was based on the fact that the inner wall was under his rule. The killing intent in his heart became more and more intense. He knew that he had to hurry up. Only in this way would it be possible to help Haisha to reunite her consciousness and let her return. Poland kept looking at this youth. He saw his eyes change from depression to despair, then to hope, and finally killing intent. He was secretly shocked, not knowing what he was thinking. "Do you have anything valuable here?" Dean asked Poland as he walked along the corridor. Poland's face slightly changed as he heard that Dean was no longer entangled in the previous problem. He hesitated for a moment and whispered, "Mainly to study monsters. For me, everything here is valuable." There was nothing wrong with what he said. He believed that although Dean looked calm, but he should not stay here for too long. "How do you make God's marrow and God's blessing?" Dean asked. Poland was startled as he looked at Dudian. "I'm not particularly clear." Dean's footsteps slightly paused as he glanced at him. Suddenly, he grabbed the palm of one of the two colleagues next to him and broke one of the fingers of the colleague. The man let out a blood-curdling scream and clutched his severed finger. The pain was so great that his face was distorted. Poland was angry. What are you doing? I hope you will answer all my questions." Dean looked at him. "You'd better not think about flukes. I know more about you than you think. In addition, your son, granddaughter, and all your family members will pay for your words if you don't cooperate." Dean paid attention to the doctor's family as he read the files. Apparently, he wasn't alone. Poland's face changed as he heard Dean's words. What did you do to them?" "What will happen to them depends on what will happen to you." Dean said a tongue-twisting sentence. Poland's face changed as he stared at Dean. "You won't get anything if you hurt my family. They will be fine as long as you cooperate." No, I want to see them first. Poland's attitude was firm. I won't say anything if I don't see them. I won't say anything even if you kill me. You got guts. Dean narrowed his eyes. Are you threatening me? Poland looked at Dudian's eyes. He felt a murderous aura cutting through his body. His tough attitude softened. How do I know that you won't keep your words? How do I know if they are injured or not? Once I tell you everything, they will be worthless. If you want to harm them, I won't be able to stop you. You have to let them go first. Dean raised his hand and patted his shoulder. You have to see clearly that you don't have the qualifications to negotiate with me. Even if I take you to see them, I will kill them one by one in front of you if you don't listen to me. Even if I have killed half of them, don't you care about the other half? Dean's tone was calm, as if he was a teacher persuading students. Poland's face turned pale as he listened to Dudian's words. He felt that there was a devil's soul hidden under that delicate skin. He knew what Dudian meant. His threat was meaningless. Under normal circumstances, he could use his information to exchange for the life and death of his loved ones. Dudian wouldn't dare to act rashly against his loved ones. Chapter 696. Can you tell me now? Dean took back his hand and quietly looked at him. Where did God's blessing come from? Poland slightly gasped as he felt incomparable pressure. God's blessings and God's marrow were common things in the inner wall. Of course, this referred to the high level of the major forces. However, it was one of the top secrets of the Monster Research Institute. All the blessings and God's marrows came from the Monster Research Institute. In other words, all the forces had to look up to the Monster Research Institute. This kind of monopoly made the Monster Research Institute aloof. Even the monastery and the hunter families didn't dare to provoke the Monster Research Institute. The Monster Research Institute could completely block the supply of God's marrows to the families if it wasn't for the rules set by the previous emperors. The Monster Research Institute could use the extraordinary power to suppress the entire giant wall. However, there were too many complicated reasons as to why he didn't do so, and involved too many things. In any case, God's marrows were the secrets of the Monster Research Institute that couldn't be leaked. Is it extracted from the bodies of monsters? Dean looked at Poland's hesitant face. I'm only asking you to tell me the source. I'm not asking you to tell me the production process. You can't even protect your life, so what are you afraid of? Poland woke up as he heard Dean's words. Indeed, the production process was complicated and it was impossible to repeat it one by one. As for the source, it was no longer a big secret. After all, this thing had been produced for more than 200 years. Although other forces couldn't figure out how it was made, but the materials needed to make it were real. It was easy to guess the source of God's marrows from those materials. God's marrows come from soul crystals and parasitic soul worms. Strictly speaking, it should be parasitic worms. Poland was silent for a moment. Soul crystals are taken from the brains of zombies. As early as 200 years ago, there was an outbreak of zombie plague in the Giant Wall. Most of the nobles and rich people were the first to migrate to the central area of the Giant Wall. In the process of solving the zombie plague, we found that the blue crystals in the brains of zombies can strengthen people's physique. But this kind of strengthening is unstable and easy to lose control. Later, after decades of research, we finally grasped the method to analyze the soul crystal. That was how we created God's blessing and the concentrated God's marrows. Dean's eyes lit up. He didn't expect the Psi Wall to be like this. The source of God's marrows was the energy extracted from the soul crystals. What is the parasitic worm you're talking about? Dudian asked. He had come into contact with this thing before. For example, to draw the boundary of the hunting area was to use the worm powder. At the edge of the wasteland, the worm powder was also used to cut the boundary. This is the first parasitic worm. There was a trace of confusion in Poland's eyes as he said, I have never seen a parasitic mythological insect with my own eyes. It is said that parasitic mythological insects can live for a long time without living in the body of a living being. Their survivability is extremely strong. Even in a sealed jar, they will not suffocate to death. Even if they're thrown into magma, they can swim and play in it. Even if their body is cut into countless pieces and ground into powder, they will reassemble. Dean was startled. So tenacious? Didn't it mean that the parasitic worm didn't need air to survive? Moreover, it had unimaginable regenerative ability and the ability to divide cells. Moreover, it was able to withstand the high temperature. It must be known that sterilization at high temperature was common knowledge in the old era. There was no bacterium or creature that could resist the high temperature. If there was, then the temperature wasn't high enough. Moreover, from the beginning of the old era, human knowledge stated that everything in nature was afraid of fire. No matter how fierce the beast was, they would avoid the fire. It showed how destructive the fire was. You said that the parasitic worm is so tenacious. Where did the parasitic worm powder come from? Dean asked. Poland looked at him and said, Parasitic godworm powder is made by parasitic godworms. These parasitic godworms are very different from primitive parasitic godworms, whether it is size or survivability. It is said that all parasitic godworms are created from the corpses of primitive parasitic godworms, and then they reproduce generation after generation. Parasitic godworms reproduce very quickly. As long as you put a few together, after a month, there will be hundreds. Dean felt a chill in his heart. So the parasitic worms used to make God's marrows are from the original parasitic worms? How did the original parasitic worm die? I don't know. It's been too long. Maybe His Majesty knows. Poland shook his head. Dean looked at him to confirm that he didn't want to talk, but he felt a trace of uneasiness in his heart. This way. Poland raised his hand to lead the way. Dean frowned as he heard Poland's words. He looked at the room next to him and stopped. He pushed open the door and went in. The room was full of frozen organs. There were human and monster organs. He frowned as he saw some seal babies. He turned around and left the room. He saw that Poland's face didn't look good, so he snorted. Poland was embarrassed. This is the need of the experiment. There's sacrifices for progress. I hope you understand. Would you understand if these children were your relatives? Dudian casually asked. Poland opened his mouth slightly and let out a bitter laugh, unable to speak. Dean's previous thoughts were disrupted by him, but he was too lazy to think about it. Perhaps everything would be answered after he completely ruled the giant wall in the future. He asked, Do you have any God's marrow here? Poland didn't know whether to say yes or no. But with this moment of hesitation, he knew that there was no way to hide it. He smiled bitterly and said, Yes. How many? I'm not in charge of these things, but I know where they are stored. I can take you there. Poland said. Then hurry up, Dudian said. Poland's eyes lit up as he took Dean to the 6th floor. I remembered wrong. It should be the 5th floor. Then he turned back to go up. Dean didn't say anything as he followed Poland back to the 5th floor. Poland came to a heavy metal door and smiled bitterly. I don't have the key, I guess. Chapter 697. The technology of using saltpeter to make ice had long been popularized in the outer wall area, so it wasn't strange for ice piles to appear here. Dean's eyes fell on the metal cabinet. There were strange metal bottles in the cabinet. They were as thick as a finger. He stepped forward and punched a metal cabinet, causing it to cave in. Then he grabbed a metal bottle from inside and unscrewed it. Immediately, a strange fragrance wafted out. This smell was exactly the same as the god's elixir he obtained in the Dragon Clan. He looked down and saw the golden liquid inside the bottle. It was God's marrows. Very good. He turned to the two people next to Poland. Wrap up all the God's marrows. I'll give you 5 minutes. Both of their faces changed as they looked at Poland. Poland couldn't help but ask, Do you want all the God's marrows we have for this month? Do you think I'll leave it for you? Dean shouted. Hurry up, or I'll cut off one of your hands. Both of them were scared. They didn't look at Poland's eyes as they went forward to open the cabinet. They took out a bunch of keys from the drawer under the table. They opened the cabinet one by one, according to the numbers on the keys. Dean diverted his attention to the surface while both of them collected the god's marrows. He was ready to guard against reinforcements. It didn't take long for both of them to take out all the god's marrow and put it into a huge black bag. Dean estimated the weight of the bag to be around 400 to 500 pounds. How many minutes have passed? One of the middle-aged men trembled. 1 minute, good. Dean raised his hand. Puff! An old man who was standing next to him had his arm cut off from his shoulder. Blood flowed out. Poland didn't think that Dean would do it without any hesitation. He didn't even put on any posture. It was as if he was casually pulling weeds. He was shocked and angry. You are so indifferent to life. If you think it is cruel, I can help him connect his arm. You can break his arm. Dean glanced at him. Poland's face turned red as he trembled in anger. The old man hugged the wound on his broken arm. He was in so much pain that his lips turned pale and he almost fainted. Dean ignored him and walked out of the room with a huge black bag. Just as he was about to leave, he suddenly heard a sharp scream from the ground. It was as sharp and harsh as a metal whistle. He looked down and immediately saw an irregular and weak heat source in the direction of the sound. He was a little surprised. He had noticed the heat source earlier, but it was still an elliptical ball. He guessed that it should be a monster's cub or an egg that was about to hatch. However, at this moment, the elliptical ball was no longer there. Instead, it had become a thin, irregular shape like a pile of mud. He was a little curious. What kind of creature was this? How could it change its form at will? It suddenly occurred to him that the heat source was on the 8th floor underground. According to the scene he saw when he attacked, this doctor was working on the 8th floor underground. In other words, the deeper he went, the more advanced the experiments he was doing. Thinking of this, he immediately turned around and walked down the stairs. Poland was startled. Are you going underground? It's rare for me to come here. I could not take a look, Dean said as he quickly went downstairs. Soon he came to the 8th floor and went straight along the corridor towards the room with the irregular heat source. Poland was just coming down the stairs when he saw the direction Dean was going. His face changed as he quickly chased after Dean. Dean was curious as he noticed Poland's expression. He kicked the door open and looked at the irregular heat source in the room. The room looked like a laboratory. There were many test tubes and experimental materials soaked in it. In the middle of the room, there was a huge transparent jar. It was about 3 meters in diameter and 2 meters high. The bottom of the jar was dark. A black mass was creeping inside. It seemed that it wanted to squeeze out from the gap between the bottom of the jar and the ground. This mud-like black substance seemed to be alive. After Dean suddenly kicked the door open, waves appeared on its body, and the frequency of its wriggling became faster. At the same time, it issued bursts of sharp sounds. Then, from its center, a fist-sized black mass slowly squirmed out. It was like a head, but also like its eyes. It stood quietly, as if it was watching Dean. Dean had a feeling that he was being stared at. The feeling wasn't friendly. It was full of evil and killing intent. It was as if a ferocious beast was staring at him. Dean's eyes lit up. From the environment, it should be an experimental product of the Monster Research Institute. However, he had never seen such a monster. There was no record of it in the Monster Atlas. What is this? Dean asked Poland, who was chasing after him. Poland's face changed as he saw the black substance in the glass jar. He didn't expect that the boy would notice it, but he was glad that the boy didn't seem to recognize the substance from his reaction. He immediately said, "This is our experimental product. It is a semi-finished product. It hasn't been completed yet." "Is it?" Dean noticed that Poland's eyes flashed before answering. Most of his words couldn't be taken seriously. He narrowed his eyes. "Is this thing alive? How did you make it? What is its function? What is the purpose of making it?" He asked a series of questions quickly. He stared at Poland as he finished. Poland's expression changed slightly. He could easily make up a name, but he would need some time to think if he wanted to come up with something else. He saw that Dean's eyes were burning. Lying wasn't something he was good at. He didn't know where to start. He hesitated for a moment and said, "It is a kind of life, but its intelligence is relatively low. It is similar to an average cow or sheep. It is made from a mixture of monster and other materials. The specific process is too complicated." "What is the purpose of making it?" Dean repeated. He didn't give him time to think. Poland's body tightened. "It is mainly used for exploration. Its perception is relatively sharp. It It can be used as a tamed beast to explore wasteland. Dean felt Poland's heartbeat speed up. He narrowed his eyes. So its attack power is relatively weak? Yes, yes. Dean stepped forward and kicked the glass jar. The glass jar seemed to be transparent, but it was extremely hard. Fortunately, he used all his strength to kick it. Bang! A hole appeared in the glass jar, but no glass fragments sputtered out. Instead, the glass jar was concave like a sheet of iron. Before Dean could withdraw his foot, the black substance seemed to have sensed something. Bubbles emerged from its body and stretched out black tentacles to wrap around Dean's foot. Dudian returned to Poland's side. He grabbed the severed arm of the old man and threw it into the hole of the glass jar. The old man was stunned on the spot. He picked up the severed arm and hoped to reattach it in the future. At this time, the broken arm fell into the glass jar, and the black substance immediately surged like an excited child, making squeaking sounds. All the liquid in the body rushed to the broken arm and soon wrapped the broken arm. The black whiskers that had previously wrapped around Dean immediately plunged into the broken arm. The next moment, the skin on the surface of the broken arm quickly shriveled, and the old arm became even older. The skin color also became dim, and dark spots appeared on it, like the hand of a corpse. Dean narrowed his eyes. Sucking life? He seemed to have seen such a situation before. Chapter 698. This is called Weak Attack. Dean looked at Poland. Poland was a little embarrassed. He coughed and said, "Well, it's still a semi-finished product. We don't know its specific abilities, so it's better if we don't get too close to it." Dean was too lazy to pay attention to him. Previously, he said that it was used to explore perception. Now he said that it was a semi-finished product. It was obvious that there was no truth in his words. Even if Dean used coercion, it would be difficult to get the core information. Suddenly, a scene flashed through his mind, and he was stunned. The next moment, he turned his head and looked straight at Poland, saying, "What is this thing called? How many do you have here?" Poland's heart tightened as he saw the sudden change in Dean's expression. It is called Black Prison. There is only one of it in our institute. Other branches also have it, but they are semi-finished products like this one. Dean narrowed his eyes. "You have always said that it is a semi-finished product. What is the ability of the finished product?" Poland's face slightly changed. He hesitated for a moment. The finished product should be similar to this one, but the volume is a bit bigger. The ability is the same, but a lot stronger. Dean deeply looked at him. He turned to look at the black mucus in the glass jar. Bone armor appeared on his arm as he reached out to grab the black mucus. The black mucus sensed Dean's approach. The surface of the mucus squirmed and stirred up many particles, like a frightened cat. But the next moment, a bunch of black tentacles sprang out from the mucus and stabbed at Dean's arm. Dean's speed increased as he punched into the glass jar. He quickly retracted his hand. There was a ball of black mucus in his palm. It felt soft and slippery to the touch. He looked at it for a while and suddenly took out a match from his pocket and lit it up. The scorching heat caused the black mucus in the glass jar to immediately go dormant. The surging mucus on the surface also calmed down. It was like a black mirror, smooth and flat, not moving at all. Seeing this, Dean was more convinced. He put the match on the small ball of black mucus in his hand. Whoosh! Vigorous sparks suddenly appeared, as if a large mass of flammable material was suddenly burned. Dudian immediately clenched his fist to extinguish the fire, but the burning pain came from his palm. He spread out his hand and saw that the color of the burnt black mucus had changed. It became lighter, a bit like grease. He turned to look at Poland, whose face had turned ugly, and said, "So this thing was made by you." This thing was very similar to the giant black ball monster that he had encountered outside the giant wall. It had absorbed the life of the splitter. The latter could change its shape at will, and was also afraid of fire. In addition, there was something else similar to this black mucus that wasn't recorded in the Monster Atlas. These similarities made him think that they were the same kind of creature, but the latter was bigger. If Poland's description was correct, then perhaps the one he met outside the giant wall was the finished product of this little thing. Poland subconsciously took a step back as he looked at the chill in Dean's eyes. What is your purpose in creating this? Dean raised his hand and grabbed his neckline. You better be honest. If you say half a word, I'll make you regret it for the rest of your life. Poland's face turned ugly as he didn't expect Dean to know about the dark prison. He didn't think that Dean knew about the dark prison from the beginning. Did Dean see the extraordinary aspects of the dark prison in just a moment? What kind of eyesight was that? Were the battle madmen so sensitive to this kind of thing? He hesitated. After thinking about it, he decided to give in to Dean to protect himself. Just as he was about to open his mouth, Dean suddenly narrowed his eyes and loosened his hand. It seems that we should go. Take this thing with us. What does it eat? Poland was puzzled, but still said, It eats meat. You find a way to take this thing out. I'll go and meet your friend. Dean put the package of God's marrow in the room and took Aisha out of the room. But he was always paying attention to Poland. He could see Poland's every move, even if he wasn't underground. It was basically impossible for Poland to escape with his weak physique. As soon as he came to the ground, Dean heard the whistling wind. He looked up and saw a huge black bird in the dark night. Its 4 or 5 meters long black wings were extremely ferocious. The edges of the black wings and the inside of the wings were full of sharp thorns, full of destructive power, but seemed a bit nondescript. In the middle of the black wings was a black-haired young man with a cold face, fair skin, and deep eye sockets, making his pupils particularly deep and charming. It was the first time that Dean saw a black-haired pioneer. Most of the pioneers he had seen before had blonde hair. It was the hair color of the aristocracy. Among the ordinary people, the aristocracy ruled the civilians. But among the strong, the aristocracy occupied an absolute advantage in number. I can only rely on you. Dean turned to look at Aisha. There was a trace of sigh and tenderness in his eyes. After this is over, I'll take care of these kittens and puppies. Aisha was silent. Dean raised his hand and gently shook the bell. The bell tinkled rhythmically. Upon hearing this sound, Aisha's indifferent eyes suddenly revealed a trace of ferocious bloodthirstiness. As if waking up from a deep sleep, she suddenly raised her head and looked at the black-haired youth who was approaching from the sky. She roared and fiercely rushed forward to meet him. The youth saw Dean and Aisha from afar. He didn't recognize them because Aisha was wearing a veil, but judging from their appearance and aura, he knew that they were the real culprits who attacked the Monster Research Institute. He immediately accelerated and was about to land. Before he had time to ask about their identity, he was scared by Aisha, who was the first to pounce on him. Aisha's footwork was unskillful and messy, but her speed was astonishingly fast. She soon rushed in front of the youth. The youth was startled. Who are you? Roar. Aisha growled and pounced on him with bared fangs and brandished claws. The youth was annoyed. He turned his palm, and a spear appeared. He swayed and stabbed at Aisha's neck. After all, Aisha was different from ordinary undeads. She didn't hit the spear, but raised her hand to slap it. This slap was not like an ordinary slap, but a set of grappling techniques. Bang! She pressed the spear in the youth's hand into the ground. Then she stepped on the spear and rushed in front of the youth. Her fingers stabbed at the carotid artery of the youth. The youth was shocked. He wanted to pull out the spear and retreat, but he felt that Aisha was stepping on it. He could only abandon the spear and retreat. Dean was startled when he saw Aisha's sudden change of attack method. His eyes lit up. He was surprised and pleasantly surprised. Generally, zombies would completely lose their consciousness, leaving only the primitive instinct of eating and attacking. But Aisha's attack was completely different. Ordinary zombies could do it. Did it mean that his consciousness still existed in his mind, but he couldn't open his mouth and express it? Thinking of this, he was excited. At this time, with the advantage of wings, the youth swooped down to attack Aisha from time to time in the air. His wings seemed to be implanted on his shoulders. The spikes on the wings seemed to be spliced, but they were extremely powerful. If an ordinary person was caught by these wings, he would have torn off a layer of skin. Aisha stood on the ground and roared like a lioness snarling falcon. Dean was not worried about the battle at all. His mind was drawn elsewhere by the previous thoughts. He thought of Eleanor after Undead's. The latter's performance was completely different from Aisha's. If the difference in the physique of the infected determined the different state after infection, then Eleanor's physique was also that of a pioneer. It was reasonable to say that after being infected, she should be at the Corpse King level. But her performance only had the characteristics of ordinary undeads. The only undeads he had seen with complete black pupils were Aisha and the Corpse King who infected her. If the infection was the key, then the corpse poison that infected Eleanor came from Aisha, which was also the Corpse King's corpse poison. But it still did not cause the same change. He could only think of one possibility, and that was the biggest difference between Eleanor and Aisha, the power of the bloodline. Eleanor was just an ordinary member of the Dragon Clan. She had not awakened the power of the bloodline. This was the biggest difference between her and Aisha. If this was the reason, then the young Corpse King who infected Aisha was most likely a strong member of the Devil Clan with the power of the bloodline. But there was another possibility, which was that there was a certain probability that a pioneer would be infected into a Corpse King. Aisha had this concept, but Eleanor had not. This matter, I have to ask the doctor later, Dudian thought in his heart. At this time, the battle in front suddenly changed. Haisha roared and suddenly propped up two huge wings on her back. Like two giant palms, she propped up the ground and fiercely pounced into the sky. The youth in the air saw the black wings, and his pupils shrank. He was shocked and lost his voice. Dragon Clan? Aisha had rushed out like an arrow from the bow. In the blink of an eye, she was in front of him. The dragon wings rolled, and the whole person turned into a sharp cone like a hurricane and drilled into his chest. The youth flapped his wings, but it was too late to dodge. He hurriedly tightened his wings and used his hands to protect his chest. With a bang, the two collided. The youth's wings were torn, and his body flew backward. Like a winged man with broken wings, he slid down from the air and smashed to the ground. Dean was a little surprised. He didn't issue any instructions, but Aisha actually stimulated the state of the magic mark to fight. Did she encounter a difficult opponent? So she passively stimulated the hidden power? While thinking, he looked at the youth climbing up from the ground. Suddenly, an idea came to his mind, and he raised his hand to shake the bell. Hearing the bell, Aisha's body trembled slightly. She stopped her diving posture and turned her head to look at Dean on the ground behind her. There was a faint luster in her pure black eyes. Seeing that Dean didn't take advantage of the situation to chase, the youth secretly thought that it was a good opportunity. He hurriedly flapped his wings and flew away from the ground. He knew that it was difficult to compete with the Dragon Clan's pioneer who had the magic mark of the Dragon Clan. But if he flew on the ground with the help of the geographical advantage, the latter may not be his opponent. Aisha slowly landed and folded her wings. She returned to her previous silent appearance and stood quietly. Dean looked at the direction where the youth left, took back his eyes, and turned back to the underground of the Institute. When he came back, Poland heard the footsteps. He immediately stood in the same place and didn't move. He smiled back. "Your friend is lucky. He escaped fast enough," said Dean casually. He went to a drawer next to him, opened it, and took out a key. At the same time, he faintly looked at Poland. Poland saw that his hidden key was found by Dean directly. His face suddenly turned red like a pig's liver. He clearly saw that Dean had left the surface, and the movement from the ground outside also showed that Dean was fighting outside. How could he know what he was doing here? Dean took the key and went to the room next to him. It was like a private laboratory with a bed, a desk, and simple daily necessities. He took the key and opened a safe in the room. He saw a thick stack of documents inside. He picked up the documents and glanced at them. He slightly raised his eyebrows as he saw the A+ symbol on one of the documents. He turned to look at Poland, who was at the door. There was a trace of mockery in his eyes. "I thought that you were very loyal to the Institute. It turns out that your greed is no less than mine. You actually want to use me to attack the Institute to steal the confidential information of the Institute. Are you a spy of other forces in the Institute? Or rather, You've built another research institute and are secretly researching something? Dean patted the documents in his hand. Aren't you afraid that others will come and see it? Are you so confident that they won't search your safe? Poland lowered his head and didn't speak. Dean couldn't see his expression. Dean put down the documents in his hand and went out to pick up the package. He looked at the sealed glass jar of the dark hell creature and said to Poland, "Let's go." Poland hesitated as he looked at the documents in his safe. Dean saw his concerns and indifferently said, "Don't think about it. From now on, you'll follow me to do things." Poland was startled. "You want me to do things for you? Otherwise, you would have died." Dean's words were very direct. Poland smiled in his heart as he silently followed behind Dean. Dean called Poland to come out of the institute and let the other two escape by themselves. He took Poland back along the street. There was a tailor's shop that had long been abandoned. The cloth in the tailor's shop was stained with blood. It was a sign that there had been a disaster here. Chapter 699. Dean brought Poland and Aisha back to the outer wall. Along the way, they saw a large number of undeads wandering in the streets. The whole city was full of signs of desolation. There were survivors hiding in some houses. They seemed to be praying for help. However, from the situation on the street, it seemed that the army had not started their cleanup, or rather, the army had gone somewhere else. From what he saw, Dean guessed that the army was protecting the nobles as they retreated. It could be seen that the situation in the inner wall was not much different from the outer wall. The nobles occupied the absolute height, while the life and death of the civilians were as cheap as grass and trees. Dean didn't rescue the survivors. He didn't have the slightest sympathy. Good people were sheep, evil people were wolves. Whether they were wolves or sheep was their own choice. He had expected this phenomenon, but the reality was crueler than he had imagined. But he was more than happy to see such a situation. It would also become an explosive chess piece in his hands, paving the way for his revenge. Dean found an unmanned horse for Poland to ride. He carried the bottle of God's marrow and the black slime creature named Hell and ran at full speed. There was a glimmer of light in the horizon when they arrived at the giant wall. It was dawn. The night was destined to be extremely long for the people of the inner wall. "Are you from the outer wall?" Poland was surprised as he saw Dean standing in front of the giant wall. Dean glanced at him. "What's the problem?" Poland's face changed as he bowed his head in silence. In his mind, the outer wall had always been a barren area ruled by the Monster Research Institute. It would be good if he could reach the level of a senior hunter. But Dean's strength wasn't that of a senior hunter. Moreover, he was able to repel the pioneers. This wasn't something a simple person from the outer wall could do. He knew that he was involved in a huge conspiracy. Dean was likely to have a deal with a major force in the inner wall. Dean didn't pay attention to Poland's thoughts. He flew Poland to the giant wall and returned to the ground. Then he took Poland along the giant wall passage to the outer wall area. An hour later, he brought Poland back to Utopia Mountain. The first ray of light was shining from the edge of the giant wall. It was falling on the square of the temple. Dean felt a trace of warmth as it brushed past his body. "Young master, you're back." Noyce was waiting at the door of the temple. He didn't sleep at all. He was the first one to greet Dean. Dean nodded and led Poland into the temple. Noyce handed a cup of hot tea to Dean. "Master, you have worked hard. Are you hurt?" "No." Dean took a sip of hot tea to dispel some of the chill in his left hand. He looked at Poland. "How long does it take to make the magic tool?" Poland was secretly awestruck as he saw the magnificent hull. Although he didn't know much about the matters of the outer wall, but he knew that Dean's influence in the outer wall was extraordinary. It showed that Dean's power in the outer wall was monstrous. Plus, his strength was comparable to that of the pioneers. It was estimated that the entire outer wall was in his hands. He couldn't guess Dean's purpose. It will take at least 1 month. 1 month? Dean slightly frowned. "I can't wait that long. I'll give you at most half a month." Poland replied, "Absolutely not in half a month. If I'm not wrong, then you don't have the equipment to make the magic tool. 1 month is very tight. I'll only give you half a month," Dean said in a cold voice. "You don't have to worry about the equipment. Tell me what you need, and I'll send people to cooperate with you. If you can't make it in half a month, then you don't need to breathe." Poland was angry as he saw Dean was so overbearing. The process of making the magic tool is complicated. "Unless you can ask my former colleagues to help you. Otherwise, I won't be able to make it in half a month. I'll personally assist you. You don't need to talk about it anymore." Dean waved his hand. "Write a list of the materials and equipment you need. I'll ask someone to prepare them. Also tell me the process of making the magic tool." Poland was annoyed as he thought, "What's the use of helping me? You're adding to my troubles." But he knew that it was useless to say more. He could only rely on Dean. To make the magic tool, you need to cut off half of the parasitic soul worm from the owner's body. This is the key to making the magic tool. Only in this way can the magic tool replace the mutation of the body. Moreover, the magic tool can only be used by the corresponding owner. If it falls into the hands of others, then it's just an ordinary weapon. Dean nodded slightly. He had learned from Aisha that cutting off half of the parasitic soul worm was the most dangerous step in making the magic tool. The parasitic soul worm would enter the body and form magic marks. It was the biggest weakness of the human body. Cutting off half of the magic marks was equivalent to cutting off half of the heart. If one wasn't careful, then one would lose his life. So the general people who made the magic tool would do it before the magic marks were implanted into the body. Such conditions could only be achieved by the Witcher family or the military. For example, Aisha's magic tool was made when she was very young. She had cut off the parasitic soul worm and only implanted half of it into the body. This harsh condition was a huge threshold for many pioneers who had evolved into pioneers through their own opportunities. After all, cutting off the magic marks was life-threatening. If it was light, they would be disabled, but if it was heavy, they would die. Not all pioneers dared to cut off the magic marks to make demon hunting tools. Therefore, most pioneers chose to abandon their own bodies, regardless of their image. Most of these pioneers were sent outside the giant wall to guard the wasteland, so as not to frighten the people. The process of cutting off the magic marks will be dangerous if I'm alone. Poland saw Dean's calm expression and thought that he didn't know the danger. He explained, "The probability of death is at least 50% and 70% is likely to cause disability. If you have the most advanced equipment in the Institute and find 2 PhDs, then the success rate will be much higher. At most, there's only a 20% chance of failure." Dean nodded slightly. The probability of 20% was not low. Not everyone dared to take such a risk. "Isn't there another way?" Dean looked at him. Poland was startled. He didn't expect Dean to know so much. He hesitated for a moment. "Indeed, there is another way. That is to find the same kind of parasitic soul worm and cut off half of it to make the magic tool. The other half will be used as nutrients to integrate into the magic marks in the body. Then take a drop of blood from the magic marks." Dean saw that he wasn't lying. He nodded slightly. This method was told to him by Isha, but this method was rarely used. It was almost a forgotten method. It should be known that only those who had evolved to the limitless realm would need a demon hunting tool, and the production of a demon hunting tool required enormous wealth and connections. Even in the dragon race, only core members of the clan or those with outstanding aptitude could receive the support of the clan and be given a demon hunting tool. Ordinary members had no chance of applying for it. As for the core members, most of them would apply to make the magic tool from an early age. So there was no need to cut off the magic marks from the body. Therefore, in addition to this kind of people, most of the people who didn't have a strong enough relationship with the family would apply to make the magic tool after they were promoted to pioneers. Chapter 700. Dean naturally wouldn't choose to take the risk of intercepting the deified parasitic soul worm in his body. But he had 2 splitter soul worms in his hand. He could use them to make a magic hunting tool and take a drop of blood from the deified magic marks. There was almost no danger if he only took a drop of blood from the magic marks. Moreover, with the help of the deified gene in the drop of blood, not only he could maintain the body with a magic hunting tool, but also slowly assimilate the quality of the magic hunting tool. After all, his magic marks were deified splitter, which was very different from ordinary magic marks. But according to what Aisha had told him, the demon hunter tool would slowly assimilate with the body after a long time. Even if this demon hunter tool was made from Splitter's magic mark, it would slowly transform into a god demon hunter tool after a long time. Since this method works, then let's do it, Dean said. Intercepting the magic marks is the most time-consuming step to make the magic hunting tool. Now you don't need to intercept the magic marks. Half a month is enough for you to make the magic hunting tool. Poland smiled. If that's the case, then I can barely do it without eating or sleeping. Dean didn't pay attention to Poland's complaints. With Poland's help and the 5-star alchemist to do odd jobs for him, half a month would be more than enough. He waved to Poland. Write a list of the materials you need. I'll arrange it now. Poland sighed as he walked towards Dudian's desk. He picked up the pen that Dudian had handed over. He bent down and thought for a moment before starting to write. Dudian picked up the list after Poland finished writing. Although he couldn't see any problems, but at least he could pretend to understand. At the same time, he could more or less see the secrets of making the magic hunting device from some of the materials on the list. After reading it, he handed the list to Noyce. Go get it. Yes, master. Noyce respectfully nodded as he took the list and left. Dean looked at Poland after Noyce left. I was pressed for time, so I didn't ask you. I remember you said that 200 years ago, you first noticed the effect of God's marrow. You saw someone eat the soul crystal by mistake, and their body turn into ice crystals. Is that right? Poland bowed. Yes. Is this crystallized body tissue a corpse? Dean stared at him. Bolon shook his head slightly. It's different from turning into a corpse. After turning into a corpse, the body's tissues will freeze, but after turning into ice crystals, the body will slowly lose its flesh and blood tissues and transform into a specialized tissue. This ice is different from the ice that is frozen by water. At this point, he paused and furrowed his brows. After thinking for a moment, he said, It's a little difficult to describe. You should know that ice frozen by water is lifeless. After it melts, it becomes water again. However, this kind of crystallized tissue is different. It won't melt and is alive. Life. Dean looked at him. How do you define it? Poland forced a smile and said, This is a bit difficult to explain. I don't know how to describe it to you. Your ability to express yourself is quite poor. Dudian commented, but his heart was secretly thinking. His left hand was crystallized. No matter how high the temperature was, it wouldn't melt, but it would bring warmth. Can this body be cured? Dean asked again. Poland shook his head. I haven't found a cure for the time being. What happened to the people who had crystallized their body more than 200 years ago? Dudian narrowed his eyes. Poland's face slightly changed as he shook his head. I don't know. Dean noticed the change in his face. There was a trace of coldness in his eyes. Do you still want to lie to me? Poland's face turned ugly as he bowed his head. Are you really not going to say? Dean stared at him. Poland bowed his head in silence. Don't forget that your family is still in my hands. Dean reminded him in a cold voice. Poland's face changed as he clenched his fingers and bowed his head. He didn't say anything. Dean slightly raised his eyebrows. He didn't expect that Poland wouldn't say anything. There was a bad premonition in his heart. Was there a big secret hidden in this matter? He thought for a long time, but couldn't find an answer. He looked at Poland deeply. He didn't continue to ask questions as it would expose that he didn't kidnap Poland's family. He changed the question. Why don't you implant the magic marks into your body to enhance your physique? At least your mind would be more agile and your lifespan would be longer, right? This was something he felt strange about. However, he always felt that the magic mark implanted into his body didn't just bring him power, especially when he saw the little worm penetrate into his body and form the magic marks. There was an inexplicable feeling. It was fear, but also an unspeakable sense of loss. It was as if he had lost something extremely important. Poland slightly loosened his fists as he saw that Dean didn't continue to ask questions. He was afraid that Dean would really kill his family. He felt that he would go crazy from the pain. However, although he was relieved, Dean's question made him feel embarrassed. He felt that every question of the teenager was sharp and touched the taboo in his heart. We are researchers. It's useless for us to need power. Poland bowed his head. Power is useful for everyone. Don't you want to live longer? Dean looked at him. If a doctor doesn't take his own medicine and doesn't accept his own treatment, then there's only one reason. That is that he will die and the situation will get worse after the treatment. Poland's face changed. Cold sweat oozed out of his face as he buried his head lower. It was hard for him to imagine that he wouldn't be able to answer a question in front of a teenager who was less than 20 years old. The hall fell into silence. Bolin could only hear his own heavy breathing. He tried to hold his breath, but his heart was beating faster. He could only open his lips to take in air so that his breathing would not be so obvious. Tell me why. Dean looked at him. Poland bit his lips. After a long time, he sighed and raised his head like a deflated balloon. His face was full of exhaustion. You really are a monster. Didn't you kidnap me to make a demon hunting tool for you? How can you still pay attention to these things? You answer my question, Dudian said. Poland smiled and sighed. In fact, it's nothing. I can't go back now. I admit that I have violated the prohibition. He whispered. In fact, it's the rule of the Institute. As for the reason, it's probably because of the magic marks. It's not as significant as you think. Indeed, the magic marks can enhance the body, make the mind more agile, and have extraordinary abilities. But it can't make people live longer. The corner of his mouth revealed a bitter smile as he said, the lifespan of a person who has been implanted with a magic mark is not much longer than that of an ordinary person. Once they die of old age, the magic mark will turn on their owner. I believe that if you see that scene, you will absolutely regret it. Dean's pupil shrank. Magic marks bite back? I've seen a lot of deaths. Why haven't I seen a magic marks bite back? He immediately asked. Poland looked at him mockingly. I'm talking about dying of old age. Have you ever seen a hunter die of old age? No. If you had seen one then, you wouldn't have asked this question. People who die in battle will have their magic marks die along with them. But people who die of old age won't have their magic marks die. Instead, they will devour the owner and take away the life of the owner to survive. Dean was startled. Suddenly, a chill spread from his chest. His scalp went numb, and goosebumps appeared all over his body. His heart trembled. He suddenly remembered that there was a living parasitic soul worm wrapped in a magic mark on his chest. This thing would bite back at the owner's death. Chapter 701. Although Dudian was afraid of the backlash of the magic marks, but he felt that this point alone shouldn't be enough to make the PhD to give up the huge power brought by the magic marks. After all, according to Dudian, the magic marks will backfire if you die of old age, but not if you die in battle. So if you want to block the backlash of the magic marks, you just have to commit suicide before you die of old age. Poland looked at Dean's sharp eyes and sighed. Yes, this is only one of the reasons. There are two other reasons. The first one is that our Monster Research Institute has a ban. All the people involved in the experiment are prohibited from using experimental materials without authorization. If they violate the ban, they will be executed immediately. There was once a person who was attracted by the power of the magic marks during the research. He infested himself with a legendary parasitic soulworm. As a result, he was wanted by the entire wall and ended up being sentenced to death. Ban? Dean narrowed his eyes. He didn't expect that the Institute would forbid them to use the magic marks. Looking at Poland's expression, it shouldn't be a lie. Moreover, this kind of lie could be easily verified. There should be no need to lie. The second point is related to the myths of the previous era. Poland continued. In the myths, the goddess of war stabilized the world order and brought peace. But when the demons invaded, the magic marks were selected from the demons. It is an ominous mark that will bring disaster to the people around you. Although it can bring great power, but it is a hotbed for the demons. So if it is not necessary, the average person won't easily use the magic marks. After all, it is the power of the demons. Dean was startled. He didn't expect that the second reason would involve the beliefs of the myths. However, the myth that Poland said was a bit strange to him. Although he wasn't well-read, but he was familiar with the myths of the world. But he had never heard of the myths of other countries that were similar to Poland's. Could it be that this mythological story was also created after the disaster? He felt that it was necessary for him to go to the library to look for books related to this. He had looked for before, but his status was low and the number of books he could enter was limited. Later on, although his status was high, he had more things to do, so he slowly neglected this matter. Myths of the previous era, Dean muttered. Suddenly, he looked at Poland. Wasn't the previous era destroyed? All the information is gone. How can there be myths of the previous era? Poland replied. Because of the catastrophe, a lot of knowledge of the previous era was lost. But the myths were engraved on the stone tablets. It is said that the first wall lord fished them out from the sea. The myths are incomplete. Dean frowned. The first wall lord could fish things out from the sea. Poland nodded. The first wall lord was blessed by the divine kingdom. He had extraordinary power. Fishing things from the sea was a piece of cake. The gift of the kingdom? Dean heard another strange word. It wasn't an adjective. His heart skipped a beat. Kingdom of God? Poland was surprised to see Dean's surprised expression. It wasn't a big secret in the inner wall. At least the pioneers weren't unfamiliar with it. But it seemed that Dean didn't know anything about it. He thought for a moment. The kingdom of God is the kingdom of the gods. Legend has it that it is a paradise created by the god of war. There is peace and tranquility. There are no wars, plagues, or disasters. All the monsters don't dare to invade it. Dean stared at Poland's eyes. Are you talking about a fictional myth? Or is it true? Where is the kingdom of God? It's outside the giant wall, a very far-away place. There is a trace of yearning in Poland's eyes. According to His Majesty, the life there is completely different from ours. People live in harmony. They don't have to worry about food and drink. Moreover, there are rich minerals and gold everywhere. His Majesty also said that there is a coffin that can make people immortal. He didn't notice that Dean's face had become extremely ugly. Dean controlled his emotions and restored his expression. He didn't know whether he should be happy or distressed. He didn't expect that there would be a kingdom of God in addition to the giant wall. He thought that he would be able to rule all the surviving humans after he overthrew the inner wall. But now it was just a part of it. He said that the kingdom of God is far away. How does His Majesty know about it? Has he been there? Dean looked at Poland. Poland indifferently smiled. Of course, His Majesty has been there many times. Only His Majesty can go there at will. How'd he go there? Dean stared at him. The farther they were from the giant wall, the stronger the monsters, especially in the depths of the wasteland. Legendary monsters would be killed. Could it be that the power of the giant wall was far stronger than the pioneers? Of course, the messenger of the kingdom of God came to greet him. Poland's voice was full of envy and pride. He glanced at Dean. I don't know if you have seen a dragon. The messenger of the kingdom of God rides on it. Usually every 10 or 5 years they come to us. Dragon? Dean felt that it was somewhat familiar and suddenly froze. He remembered that he had inadvertently looked up and saw a shadow flying over the giant wall. At that time, someone said that it was a dragon. He didn't care about it. He just felt that it was a bit strange. The dragon didn't eat the creatures inside the giant wall. Now, after listening to Poland's words, he suddenly realized that there were people riding on the back of the dragon. No wonder it didn't descend to attack humans. Riding a dragon across the wasteland. Dean's eyes flashed. Tell me everything you know about the kingdom of God. Poland saw a trace of fear in Dean's eyes. His mood was a bit better, but he didn't show it. I'm just an experimenter. I don't know much. I only know that the leader of the wall is appointed by the kingdom of God. Our Monster Research Institute is actually under the control of the kingdom of God. His Majesty has to unconditionally cooperate with us to do experiments. The leader of the wall is appointed by the kingdom of God? Dean was surprised. What was the concept? Didn't it mean that the kingdom of God was completely above the giant wall? If this was the case, then the kingdom of God had the power to crush the giant wall. He felt a trace of shiver. It also confirmed that the pioneer was not the end of evolution. There should be a stronger existence above this. And that existence lived in the kingdom of God. The leader of the wall is appointed by the kingdom of God. Isn't the entire giant wall a city of the kingdom of God? Dean's eyes flashed as he felt a suffocating pressure in his heart. When he first heard the word kingdom of God, he thought that it was the same as the giant wall gathering place in Sylvia's giant wall. But the name was different. But from the point of view that the wall lord was appointed by the kingdom of God, it seemed that the name was not for the sake of showing off, but really had the role of kingdom. From Poland's words, it could be seen that the status of the giant wall and the kingdom of God was like the difference between the mayor and the king. Moreover, a messenger of the kingdom of God could invite the leader of the wall to enter the kingdom of God alone. This showed that the giant wall itself was a subsidiary of the kingdom of God. He suddenly felt that the hazy fog that shrouded the outside of the giant wall was suddenly torn apart. A towering giant was entrenched in front of him. He had struggled to overthrow the giant wall, but it was just a subsidiary of this giant. What he had to face wasn't just the inner wall. Once he overthrew the inner wall and got the ruling power, it was tantamount to starting a war with the kingdom of God. He would face the sanctions of the kingdom of God. His face was slightly pale. He felt that the air was very stuffy. If he knew about the kingdom of God, then he wouldn't have started the war so soon. He would have continued to operate. He would have spent a long time to completely encroach on the inner wall. Then he would be a devil in the dark. He would be in charge of the giant wall. Then he would only need to push out a puppet to be the leader of the wall. But now the arrow was already on the bowstring. Suddenly, he thought of Poland's words. Wyverns would come to the giant wall every 10 or 5 years. He remembered that the last time he saw the wyverns was less than a year ago. In other words, the next time the wyverns would come to the giant wall would be 4 years later. If he was lucky, the flying dragon would only come once every 10 years. In that case, he still had 9 years to plan. It's not a dead end, he muttered to himself. He felt a little relieved, but he still felt that time was running out. Even if he came once every 9 years, he couldn't guarantee that he could find a way to fight against the God Nation within 9 years. After all, it had been 10 years since he came to this world. In these 10 years, he had climbed from a lowly peasant to his current position. In the process, he had fallen into desperate situations several times, but he was lucky enough to escape. A large part of the credit was brought by the super chip, but he didn't know if the knowledge inside would be useful against the kingdom of God. If I could make a nuclear bomb in 9 years. Such an idea came into his mind, but soon he felt a trace of cold air. Let's not talk about whether he could make a nuclear bomb or not. Even if he could make a nuclear bomb, the price to eliminate the threat would be to bury the entire kingdom of God. The number of people living in the kingdom of God should be more than the number of people in the giant wall. He thought of his father's words before he went into hibernation. Use the super chip to lead the survivors to find a way to survive. But now he seemed to be more and more deviating from his father's instructions. He didn't want to violate the instructions of his most beloved person, but he would die if he didn't do so. When that thought popped up in his mind, he felt that he was the biggest pest in the world, the biggest destroyer. Perhaps his death was a good thing for the world. Chapter 702. Aisha sat next to Dean like a virtuous wife. Dean slowly retracted his gaze from her face, slightly closed his eyes, and said, "You can go back first. If there is anything else you need, you can come to me at any time." Poland was relieved as he saw that Dean didn't ask any more questions. "Arrange a place for him," Dean said to Noyce. "Also prepare the materials on the list as soon as possible. Let Hawkeye and Sword King transfer the best alchemist from the Life faction to assist him." "Yes, master." Noyce nodded respectfully. Dean slowly opened his eyes as he looked at the empty temple. There was a trace of worry in his heart. He sighed as he pinched the bridge of his nose. Although there were some doubts in his heart, but he was too lazy to ask. It was difficult for him to digest what Poland had said about the kingdom of God. It was a huge hidden danger that he would have to face in the future. Plotting to overthrow the inner wall had exhausted his mind and mind. Now he hadn't solved the problem of the inner wall. Moreover, the kingdom of God was looking down from afar. Fortunately, it was extremely far from the giant wall to the wasteland. Moreover, the kingdom of God would only visit the giant wall once every 10 or 5 years. It could be seen that the road in between was extremely long and extremely dangerous. He wouldn't know about the changes in the giant wall for a while. If it was in the old era when communication was developed, then his actions would have been erased by the supreme ruler. In the world of information jam, he could only feel the elephant like a blind man. In the end, he was too small like an ant. If he could cover the sky with one hand, then it would be clear at a glance. He secretly sighed. The existence of the kingdom of God might not be a bad thing for him. According to Poland, the first ruler of the wall had the extraordinary ability to fish out things from the bottom of the sea. This ability was bestowed by the kingdom of God. In other words, the level of science and technology in the kingdom of God was far higher than the level of the giant wall. Therefore, the giant wall couldn't study the problem of zombification, but perhaps he could find a glimmer of hope in the kingdom of God. Thinking of this, his heart suddenly became hot. He roused his spirit, and a sharp light flashed in his eyes. He recalled all the information Poland had told him before. He said that there are 2 reasons why he didn't implant the magic mark. The first is the prohibition, and the second is the belief in mythology. The magic mark comes from the devil, so it is rejected. The myth, he said, seems to be related to the doomsday disaster, but Dean's eyes flashed slightly. These 2 reasons were still not tenable in front of him. He was no longer a nobody, but the ruler of the outer wall. The biggest difference between nobodies and rulers was not only wealth, power, and authority, but also thinking. He felt that if he was the ruler of the divine kingdom, not only would he not prohibit these experimenters from being implanted with magic marks, but he would also find ways to encourage them to do so. After all, magic marks could bring more agile thinking and faster skills, which helped to improve the efficiency of their experiments. Efficiency could shorten time and improve development. These were all beneficial and harmless. Moreover, with the power of the kingdom of God, it was able to control the giant wall, so there was no need to worry about controlling the researchers of the Monster Research Institute. Excluding these factors, he could hardly think of any reason to prevent them from implanting the magic marks. Unless the kingdom of God didn't want their experiments to progress too fast. This was the only possibility that Dean could think of. He also thought that there might be harm hidden in the magic marks, so they were prohibited from implanting the magic marks. It was like selling poison but not eating it. But this era was different. There wasn't so much humanistic care and moral dogma. In this era, people's lives were worthless in the face of monster attacks. Even if there was a huge harm hidden in the magic marks, at least in his opinion, there hadn't been any trouble after implanting the magic marks for so many years. As far as he knew, other hunters could live for many years if they didn't die in battle. If these experimenters were implanted with the magic marks, then even if there were hidden dangers hidden in the magic marks, it would be enough to create greater value before the harm broke out. Therefore, this possibility was ruled out by him. But the conclusion made him feel strange. If the kingdom of God didn't want the research to progress too fast, then why did they create the Monster Research Institute? Wasn't this contradictory? He thought for a long time, but still couldn't find a clue. Finally, he could only give up. After all, this matter wasn't the most urgent matter at present. In addition to this point, there was another thing that he felt that he must understand as soon as possible. It was the origin of the giant wall. After the emergence of the kingdom of God, he couldn't help but think of a possibility. Was the giant wall of Sylvia the only giant wall? If the giant wall was ruled by the kingdom of God, then were there other giant walls under the command of the kingdom of God? Moreover, the structure of the giant wall was magnificent and huge. It was by no means a simple human could build it. After all, there were so many monsters outside the giant wall. They could attack at any time. It was almost impossible to build such a building while resisting the monsters. And this magical giant wall was probably made by the kingdom of God. Even if it wasn't, he should be able to find the answer. Moreover, even if it was the kingdom of God, he didn't think that they had the ability to create such a giant wall. Looking at the level of infrastructure in the old era, it was unheard of to build such a giant wall. He got up and went out of the temple to find Barton. He asked him to take him to the Holy Church's library. He wanted to immediately check all the books about the giant wall. In the blink of an eye, from dawn to dusk, Dean stayed in the top floor of the library for a whole day. He sat at the round wooden desk. His face was ugly. Books were piled up around him. There were some heavy books scattered on the ground. Monsters invaded. Humans faced a catastrophe. The god of war came to repel the monsters and built the giant wall to shelter the creatures. Dean muttered to himself. His expression was a bit sluggish. He had read The Giant Wall, War Myth, and other books. Although there were subtle differences in the records, but the general content was good. Although most of the myths were fictitious, but he could still get a glimpse of the history. Just like Huaxia's legend, Swirenshi, he drilled wood to make fire, bringing fire to mankind. This merit was deified, and the more it spread, the more divine it became, causing people to think that it was imaginary. However, the matter of making fire was real. This was also the reason why Dean would read these myths. He wanted to find the truth from the fiction. Today, he had read these books, and they did not waste his time. All the demons mentioned in the books were from the starry sky. It was this point that made him extremely convinced that the things in these myths were true. Chapter 703. Now 300 years had passed. Most of the survivors from the old era had died of old age. Dean felt that he should be the most aware of the catastrophe in the world. According to the records of the Giant Wall, the catastrophe originated from the old era when humans borrowed the power of the devil. This devil's power was the nuclear bomb. All the nuclear bombs in the world, especially Russia and Asia, detonated all the hidden Ivan and caused a devastating nuclear storm. Because of this, the nuclear radiation was still raging outside the giant wall after 300 years. Countless ordinary creatures had mutated into bloodthirsty monsters. However, the reason why countries detonated the nuclear bombs was not because of the Third World War. It was because of the war against the monsters recorded in the giant wall. Extraterrestrial invasion. Earth's humans vowed to resist. This was a common theme in the old science fiction blockbusters. But on that day, 300 years ago, Dean witnessed such a fictional thing. It was like a nightmare had come to reality. He had heard his father say that it seemed that humans had launched an exploration signal into space. It had attracted the uninvited guests from the starry sky. On that day, he had witnessed the beginning of the disaster from various TV stations. Various countries had built fortresses in large cities to resist the alien races. He had explored a military fortress that stored a large number of arms outside the giant wall. It was built for the war against the alien races. Before he had fallen asleep, the news had reported that all the countries had retreated under the attack of the alien races. Some small countries had been completely destroyed. All the countries had formed the World Federation to fight against the alien races. The situation was extremely tense. At this time, his father had developed the freezer. But the situation was urgent, so there was no time to test it. At this time, his father seemed to have received some news. So he had entered the freezer. He would never forget the scene from the freezer. It was as if it was yesterday. At that time, his father had told him about the matter. It was clear that he had entrusted the hope of mankind to his hands. Now that he had seen the nuclear radiation disaster, he naturally knew that his father had learned about the final plan of mankind through some channels. It was to detonate all the nuclear bombs and perish together with the alien races. It was a tragic war. Humans had no ability to resist. They could only rely on their home advantage to barely defend and support. Now that 300 years had passed, the barbarians who were exiled to the radiation zone knew that the global nuclear explosion did not completely wipe out all humans. There were still some survivors who survived and passed on their language. However, something strange seemed to have happened. According to the normal trajectory, the survivors of the old era would either barely survive and slowly develop and multiply to adapt to the environment, or they would be completely wiped out because they couldn't adapt to the environment on Earth that had been baptized by nuclear bombs. He could only think of these two possibilities. But the third possibility had emerged, and that was the giant wall world. A new language system appeared. It was suspected that the descendants of the survivors were expelled from the territory and became barbarians. Now, the people living in the inner wall were self-proclaimed as nobles. Moreover, the giant wall was standing tall in the middle of the inner wall. He didn't know whether the giant wall was built before the outbreak of the war or after the outbreak of the war. But from the news he had read about the situation around the world before he fell asleep, he felt that it was almost impossible to have extra power to build such a big giant wall to shelter so many people. Moreover, the world had the intention to build the giant wall, so there was no need to build underground shelters in various cities. This was a self-contradictory thing. The only explanation was that the giant wall was not created by the people of the old era. This point was also recorded in the books he had read. But there was another name mentioned that made him even more a loss: the god of war. This name may be just a name given by the later generations to praise the people of the giant wall. But from all the relevant records, it seemed that the people of the giant wall were extremely fond of this race. He had heard of Sylvia countless times. It was not just a place, but a person's name. This person came from the god of war. Her name was used as the name of the giant wall. One could imagine how much the people who lived in the giant wall loved and worshipped her. The god of war defeated the alien races and built the giant wall to shelter the creatures. Dean muttered to himself. The global nuclear bomb detonation disaster continued to the present day. Such a destructive power was enough to obliterate most of the alien races that invaded the Earth. But in the historical records of the giant wall, it was believed that the people of the old era were bewitched by the devil. They used the devil's power to create the harsh environment of today. But the real expulsion of the monsters was the god of war. This was something that he could not understand, and he also felt extremely angry. This was a suicidal war that was carried out with the sacrifice of the entire human race and an incomparably tragic and bloody determination. In the end, they were spurned by the later generations, and instead, an existence that he had never heard of before was praised and praised. According to the records in the books, the god of war had extremely powerful strength. They could easily behead the monsters. He felt that the so-called god of war should not be the hidden power of the old era. Otherwise, there was no need for the countries to use the extreme method of mutual destruction to solve the war. However, these books did record the appearance of Sylvia, a female from the war god clan. Although only her upper body was visible, her curvaceous figure and stunning appearance were not an exaggeration to say that they were perfect. Her facial features were so exquisite that they seemed to be carved, without the slightest flaw. Moreover, her brows were filled with a strange allure. She looked very pure, but also seemed to emit endless charm, making it hard for one to resist. Even he, who had never been tempted by appearances, felt a burst of heat when he saw this peerless beauty drawn on the snow-white paper. God of War. Dean rubbed the bridge of his nose. His thoughts were a bit chaotic. When he woke up, he thought that he knew the origin of the disaster. But after seeing the undeads outside the giant wall, he felt that he couldn't see through it. Until now, he felt that it was more difficult to figure out. He didn't know what happened in the past 300 years after he was in a coma. Why would humans become undeads after the baptism of nuclear bombs? Where did the virus that infected humans come from? It was reasonable to say that after the explosion of the nuclear bombs, all humans should be evaporated by the high temperature. But the number of undeads outside the giant wall was extremely large. It was not like the appearance of the nuclear bombs. It was as if the explosion of the nuclear bombs did not exist. But to say that the explosion of the nuclear bombs did not exist, collapsed houses on the ground, giant pits that could be seen everywhere, and the ultra-concentration of nuclear radiation in the air all prove that the world detonated the nuclear bombs. Moreover, these monsters were only infected by the nuclear radiation. Why would there be strange things like parasitic soul worms in their bodies? Was it just a parasite infected by the nuclear radiation? And the existence of the God of War made him even more unable to see through them. They were human beings. When the alien races invaded, he had never heard of the existence of such a group of people. It was reasonable to say that the situation was extremely urgent at that time. Countries should have used this trump card, if they were not human beings, but the appearance of Sylvia was more beautiful than all the humans he had seen. Beautiful like a god. And it was an ironclad fact that the god of war built the giant wall to shelter human beings for hundreds of years. Chapter 704. Although there were a lot of things that couldn't be explained and he couldn't figure out, but Dean still got a glimpse of the true face of the world. He believed that there should be more information hidden in the inner wall. Perhaps he would be able to find other clues about the War God's clan once he completed his plan to overthrow the inner wall. He put away the book and left the library. He didn't continue to ponder here. After all, these things were too far away from him. The problem of the inner wall hadn't been solved yet. He didn't care about the hidden dangers in the distant kingdom of God. He could only take one step at a time. But this incident gave him a wake-up call. The inner wall wasn't the end. There were still great dangers hidden in the higher places. He didn't know if he would be noticed by the unknown existence when he defeated the inner wall. But there was no turning back. The only way was to accumulate more strength so that he would have a trace of resistance. It was night by the time he returned to the temple. Dudian inquired about Poland's situation. The materials needed by Poland had been fully prepared. Sword King and Hawkeye had invited the 6 most authoritative alchemists of the Dark Church to assist Poland in the production of the magic hunting tool. They were currently in the process of summarizing and preparing the materials. At the same time, news came from the military. Richelieu had used a lot of his connections and financial resources to move all the poor people in the slums to the residential areas. Although the poor people in the slums had no background, financial resources, or military strength, their connections were not simple. Many nobles and rich businessmen had businesses in the slums. When the poor people moved away, the factories they worked in would close down. Some of the working slums were tied up by the factory contracts and couldn't leave. It was up to Richelieu to use the connections of the Dark Church, the military and the Dark Church to deal with the nobles and rich businessmen behind the factories. Dean saw that the time was almost right. He asked Noyce to send a message to the barbarians outside the border. They were ready to move into the slums in 3 days. It will take at least a month for the inner wall to suppress the plague and stabilize the people. Once the magic hunting tool is made, I will be able to inject the god's marrows to improve my physique. Dean's mind was racing. His physique had been stuck at the initial stage of the limitless for a long time. Although he had the assistance of Aisha and the electric weapons, but his physique couldn't fall too far behind the inner wall. Moreover, he had a deified legendary magic mark. When his physique reached that of a pioneer, it would surpass an armed army of 100,000. Time flew by. After being kidnapped back to Poland, Dean immersed himself in studying the knowledge of the superchip. He slept about 2 hours a day on average. He was barely able to restore his spirit, but he felt more and more tired. Aisha was by his side, and the inner wall was in chaos. He estimated that she wouldn't be able to take care of the outer wall for a month. On the 7th day, Dean finally produced the electromagnetic biosensor. With the help of electricity, the efficiency of work had improved a lot. Now all the wall lamps in the temple had been replaced with electric bulbs. If such an invention was handed over to the Temple of Elements, then it would be regarded as a legendary invention. After all, the electric lamp was a super civilian item that had been passed down for hundreds of years. Once popularized, it would be a necessity for every household. Dean placed the electromagnetic biosensor in the center of the temple. The detection range of the instrument was 500 meters, including the depths of the ground. This distance was enough for him to avoid danger. For the sake of making this sensing instrument, he used up large amounts of materials, as well as wasted large amounts of materials. The production cost was over 100 times that of the Olden Era. After all, this place didn't have the Olden Era's perfect industrial system. Even a single screw had a specialized factory in the Olden Era that produced it in batches. The efficiency was high, and the cost was low. But he had to start from scratch. It took a long time, and a lot of materials were wasted. It took him 7 days to make it. Moreover, he had a lot of people as assistants. Master, the doctor said that the materials for the body of the magic hunter are ready. He needs you to provide the parasitic soul worm. Noise came to the temple and reported to Dean. Dean nodded slightly. So fast? Didn't he say it would take half a month? The doctor said that it was thanks to the alchemists of the Life faction. Their professional knowledge was richer than he imagined. Noise smiled. Dean nodded slightly, got up, and said, "Go to the secret chamber of the side hall and get one of the 2 parasitic soul worms I gave you before." "Yes, master." Noise felt a bit excited when he thought of the 2 legendary parasitic soul worms. They were legendary parasitic soul worms. He had only heard of them in legends, but he had personally seen them in person. Dean came to the shed where the Polish experiment was conducted. It was a temporary laboratory located next to the temple. He would come over to take a look when he was tired of studying the super chip or when there was trouble in the production of sensing instruments. Greetings to the speaker. As soon as he entered the laboratory, 6 people wearing black robes with golden threads saw Dean and quickly saluted respectfully. Dean nodded slightly as he looked at the busy figure in front of the operating table. "Doctor, I heard that the body has been completed. It's almost done." Poland stopped what he was doing and looked at Dean. "You can give me your parasitic soul worm. The next step is to implant the parasitic soul worm into the magic tool. Is this magic tool made for you?" Dean looked at the sword that was soaked in a green test tube. The material of the sword was taken from the arm of the Great Splitter. The blade was long and wide. There were blood lines on the surface. There were irregular, jagged spikes on the edge and back of the blade. It looked ferocious and domineering. At a glance, he could see that the shape of the sword was modified from a monster's body. There was a vortex at the hilt. When the hand gripped the hilt, the vortex was like a huge mouth that would suck the user's arm in, providing a protective effect. "Yes." Dean nodded. Noise came over with a sealed jar. Poland turned his head and saw a dark brown, centipede-like parasitic soul worm lying in the jar. His pupils shrank. The shape of the parasitic soul worm was different. Dean saw Poland's reaction and knew that he recognized the magic mark of Splitter. A cold light flashed in the depths of his eyes, but it disappeared in an instant. He said, "How long will it take to complete the Demon Hunter?" Poland came back to his senses and put away the shock on his face. He lowered his head and said, "If everything goes well, it will be done in 3 days." Chapter 705. Whoosh! A hurricane-like wind pressure came from the air as it descended over the square. There was a trace of surprise in Dean's eyes. He saw a giant black eagle hovering over St. Mark's Square. The wings of the giant eagle were more than 20 meters long. It looked like a black fighter jet. Its dark golden eyes were full of murderous aura. It didn't look like a good monster. But what surprised Dean was that there were 2 people standing on the back of the giant eagle, wearing different shapes of armor, imposing temperament, and a kind of chilling atmosphere. Did they come from the kingdom of God? Dean thought about the dragon incident that Poland had told him about, but he noticed the white cross engravings on the armors of the inner wall. His heartbeat relaxed at once. "Are you the leader of this place?" The blond youth on the back of the giant eagle looked down at Dean. His face was cold, and his eyes were as sharp as daggers. He had a cold and arrogant, aristocratic temperament. "What can I do for both of you?" Dean narrowed his eyes. "We have come to visit Her Highness Aisha. Quickly go and inform her." The blond youth ordered, as if it was a matter of course. Dean didn't care about the tone of the youth. Instead, he was surprised that the military knew about Aisha. Eleanor, who had come to investigate, had been turned into a corpse. Aisha's identity shouldn't have been leaked. Could it be that the witnesses were bribed by the people sent by the inner wall? He thought for a moment and looked at the 2. "Her Highness Aisha is in the temple. Please come with me." He gestured to the 2 as he led the way. Since he was being looked down upon, he was happy to do so. It was the perfect time to scheme. The 2 people on the back of the giant eagle looked at each other. They didn't doubt Aisha's position, as they had used their perception ability to check the surroundings. They knew that the former saintess of the Dragon Clan had extraordinary strength, and it wouldn't be easy to find traces of her. However, they knew that Dean had the strongest physique, so they knew that the youth was one of Aisha's subordinates. Whoosh! The two of them jumped down from the back of the giant eagle and landed on the square. The golden-haired youth put his hand in his mouth and blew a whistle. The giant eagle flapped its wings and slowly landed on the square. It retracted its giant scythe-like black wings. At this moment, the knights outside the square quickly gathered. Seeing the huge bird on the square, they were both shocked and frightened, but they still braced themselves and surrounded it. Dean saw Barton coming from the side hall. Tell everyone to leave the top of the mountain. No one is allowed to approach without authorization. Barton looked at the giant eagle on the square and the blonde youth who was slowly walking towards him. He felt a murderous aura coming towards him. His heart trembled, and he slowly retreated according to Dean's words. He went around the side corridor to the square to pass the order. Dean went up the steps and pushed open the door of the temple. He saw Aisha sitting on the chair in the main hall. She was as quiet as a virgin. Her fingers were gently placed on the Chong Sam on her knees. She had a dignified temperament and lowered her head. She seemed to be in a daze. Dean's eyes lit up as he turned to the two people behind him. Please. There was a trace of surprise in the blonde youth's eyes when he saw Aisha. Although Aisha's face was covered with a light veil, but their eyes were sharp. They didn't expect that the news was true. The former saintess of the Dragon Clan, who was rumored to have died in the wasteland, was still alive. Moreover, she had seized the military power of the outer wall. Dean went in front of Aisha and blocked her body behind him. He didn't want to be stared at by the two people for a long time. His action immediately caused dissatisfaction in the two people. But they were even more surprised that Aisha would connive at her subordinates to make such a rude move. Dean's mouth slightly curved as he saw the two people enter the door. He said to them, "Her Highness doesn't like to talk to strangers. If you have anything to say, then talk to me directly." The blonde youth frowned. He was a noble from the inner wall, so he looked down on the people from the outer wall. Moreover, Dean's hair color indicated that he was a lowly civilian. He wanted to directly scold Aisha, but held back. He waited for a few seconds and found that Aisha didn't respond. It seemed that she acquiesced. He was surprised and couldn't help but seriously look at Dean. "Since Her Highness Aisha is here, then we can talk face to face. You should go back," the middle-aged man said in a cold voice. His eyebrows had a bit of solemn temperament. His words were unquestionable. It made people instinctively want to obey him. Dean indifferently said, "I have already said that Her Highness doesn't like to talk to strangers. If I have said something wrong, then Her Highness will come forward to correct me. You two should speak directly. What do you want to do here?" The blonde youth raised his eyebrows. He wanted to reprimand them, but when he thought of Aisha behind Dean, he held back his anger and said, "I am Hero. I have come to visit Her Highness Aisha. A few years ago, we had cleared the monsters together. I don't know if Her Highness still remembers." "Hero." Dean narrowed his eyes. He had long seen that these two people had extraordinary physiques. They were both pioneers, but he didn't expect them to be the 10 war gods of the military. It should be known that there were more than 10 pioneers in the military. Those who could be named as the 10 war gods were undoubtedly the best among the pioneers. "I am Ronan. It's the first time we meet. I have heard the news of Her Highness, so I have come to visit." The middle-aged man with a square face politely introduced himself. When Dean heard this name, he knew that it was another war god. He thought for a moment and said, "I don't know why the two war gods have come here." Hero didn't expect Dean to continue the conversation. He was annoyed. Both of them were people of the same level as Aisha, and they represented the military. Aisha didn't even bother to say a word. She didn't give them any face. It was a deliberate humiliation. However, thinking of the purpose of this trip, he held back the words that were on the tip of his tongue. He smiled and said, "I heard that not long ago, Your Highness was framed and almost got injured in the barren area. This time, we came here with some healing gifts. I hope they can help Your Highness." After that, he took off the bag on his back and took out a pure gold box from it and handed it to Dean. Dean pretended to ask Aisha for instructions. Although the two didn't communicate verbally, this action was enough to make people feel that Dean was looking at Aisha's eyes. After turning his head, Dean took a few steps forward and took the gold box. He had seen the contents of the box with his X-ray vision. It was not a trap, but a few white egg-shaped pills. Chapter 706. Hero was unhappy. Dean didn't even say thank you after receiving the gift. It felt like he didn't put them in his eyes. He didn't have the slightest bit of respect. Moreover, his tone was the same. He didn't even bother to show the most basic courtesy. It was too casual. Hero looked at Aisha and saw that she was indifferent. It seemed that she acquiesced to Dean's words. His heart was filled with anger, but he was calm on the surface. We came to visit Her Highness. As for the military of the outer wall, it's just a trivial matter. Dean wasn't in the mood to chat with him. I'm relieved since the matter with the outer wall is a trivial matter. I was worried that I would offend you because of this matter. It would hurt our friendship. Hero almost vomited blood. He was really boasting shamelessly. Friendship? Friendship to hell. Ronan stared at Dean. To be honest, we came here because we heard that Her Highness Aisha was injured. So we came to visit her. Secondly, we came to understand the situation of the outer wall. Your Highness should know that we have arranged for the military of the outer wall. But you seized the ruling power of the military and monopolized the outer wall. What is the meaning of this? Dudian knew that they couldn't bear it any longer. In fact, he had some speculations about their intentions from the moment they appeared in the square. Sure enough, the military didn't know where they got the news about Aisha. They didn't want to admit defeat, so they came to ask for an explanation and tried to solve the matter in other ways. He would do the same if it was him. But unfortunately, he wasn't the military, and the military didn't understand him. It's the meaning of what you see, Dean indifferently said. The military of the outer wall has offended Our Highness, so they were taught a lesson by Our Highness. I hope that both of you can give us an explanation. If it wasn't for the fact that the military is in charge of the outer wall, then Our Highness would have already disposed of these people. The corner of Hero's mouth twitched slightly. Dean was the first to complain. He was annoyed. He didn't know where Aisha found such a sharp-tongued man. No wonder she handed over the communication rights to this boy. He'd have some ability. Your Highness has always lived in the inner wall. These people didn't recognize you, so they offended you. I hope you don't mind. I'll help you deal with the people who offended you, but the others are innocent. I hope you can forgive them. Ronan stared at Dean. It seemed that he regarded Dean as Aisha. Dean looked at him. No need. I have dealt with the person who offended your majesty. As far as I know, the corpses have broken out in the inner wall, and there's a shortage of manpower. How come you two have the leisure time to come here? Hero didn't expect Dean to change the topic to the inner wall. Moreover, he knew about the corpses in the inner wall. But he was relieved. After all, Aisha was from the inner wall, so it wasn't strange for Dean to be able to go in and out of the inner wall. The corpses have been suppressed under the security of the military. That's why they sent us to inquire about the situation in the outer wall and to visit Your Highness. Ronan calmly said, I heard that Your Highness and your sister Haley have some problems. Is it true that she planned the attack in the wasteland? Dean looked at him. What do you mean? Ronan looked back at him. We just want to seek justice for Your Highness. There was a trace of mockery in Dean's eyes. Do you want to sow discord between Your Highness and the Dragon Clan? Or did the Dragon Clan send you to test the attitude of Your Highness? Hero stared at Dudian. I hope Your Highness can talk about it personally. Aisha was standing behind Hero. I hope Your Highness can talk about it personally. Ronan stared at Dean. Although the Dragon Clan is deeply loved by His Majesty, but he has no right to command us. Your Highness is guarding the wasteland and killing monsters. His Majesty will be furious if the news reaches his ears. Dean understood the hidden meaning in Ronan's words. He thought for a moment. This is the family affair of the Dragon Clan. I hope you won't get involved. Although Luo Nong wants to please Aisha and even rope her in, Luo Nong can use the military to punish the dragon race. But Luo Nong feels that there should be other secrets. The military shouldn't offend the entire dragon race for Aisha. After all, the other two devil families are also eyeing the dragon race covetously. The relationship between the two families is too complicated. Hero saw that Dean didn't move and refused their good intentions. Boy, do you think that your words represent the words of His Highness? Dean coldly looked at him. His Highness will be the first to correct me if I say something wrong. It's not your turn to speak. You. Hero was about to step forward, but was pulled by Ronan. Ronan looked at Dean. His Highness has occupied the monastery and the holy church which has been operating in the outer wall for many years. He has taken away the power of the military and put the entire outer wall in his pocket. What does he want to do? This is what you really want to ask. Dean said. His Highness just wants to find a quiet place to recuperate. It's not as complicated as you think. Ronan naturally didn't believe such nonsense. He was silent for a moment as he saw that Dean was tight-lipped. Will His Highness agree if the military wants you to return the ruling power of the outer wall? Dean didn't think impossible. Ronan frowned as he looked at Dadian. You have to think about it clearly. As far as I know, Your Majesty has a lot of contradictions with Her Majesty Haley. They're going to send people to kill Your Majesty. If it wasn't for the outbreak of corpses in the inner wall and many members of the Dragon Clan were infected, they would have come to this mountain. Do you really want to make enemies on all sides? Are you threatening me? Dean looked at him. Ronan replied, It's just advice. Dean thought for a moment. It's fine if you want the military to restore the ruling power of the outer wall. But is there any benefit to make up for it? Hero slightly raised his head. Of course there is. The advantage is that the military won't intervene when the monastery and the Dragon Clan come to cause trouble. We promise you that we will do it. Dean was a little surprised, but then he felt a little funny, so there is no benefit to it. You have the nerve to say that. Hero had been tolerating Dean for a long time. He didn't hide the killing intent in his eyes. Pay attention to your tone. The outer wall is managed by the military on behalf of His Majesty. If His Majesty were to know about this matter, then he would have sent troops to wipe you out. We have given you enough face by coming to discuss with you. I don't care about your rudeness. Your Highness Aisha, if you acquiesce to his words, then I hope you will think about it. The outer wall used to belong to you. We spent a lot of effort to snatch it, so it belongs to us. Dean's logic was like a robber. If you want to take it back, then you have to pay the price. Don't tell me that you're giving us benefits if you don't do anything. You have to thank me if I don't kill you. Hero laughed. Don't you understand human language? If it wasn't for your good luck, then the monastery and the Dragon Clan would have come to teach you a lesson. They will be the first to come after you. The military didn't take action because of your Highness. Otherwise, it wouldn't be so easy to settle this account. Chapter 707. Stay. Ronan and Hero's face changed. We are here to negotiate. We don't have any malicious intent. Even if we can't reach an agreement, then there is no need to fight. You don't have any malicious intent, but I do. Dadian said in a cold voice. I was expecting you to bring something that would satisfy me. Since you were so stubborn, then go to hell. You. Hero was angry as he looked at Aisha. Your Majesty Aisha, is this what you mean? Are you going to indulge your men like this? We came to visit you with good intentions, but you are going to attack us. Don't tell her. Ronan shook his head. Haven't you seen that Aisha is dead? This person isn't Aisha. Haven't you noticed that she isn't breathing and has no heartbeat? Hero was startled as he tried to sense it. He could understand that Aisha was hiding her body heat, but it wasn't normal that she wasn't breathing and had no heartbeat for so long. Ronan looked at Dean. I don't know what method you use to control Her Highness Aisha, but don't think that you can act recklessly just because she is here. Our military isn't a persimmon that you can knead at will. Do you really want to be our enemy? I want to be friends with you, but the reality doesn't allow it. Dadian knew that Ronan was aware of the truth about Aisha, so he didn't hide it anymore. Instead of waiting for you to sort out the corpses in the inner wall, it would be better to abolish the two military gods. I think they won't be able to launch a large-scale attack, even if they know about it. Hero was angry. Abolish us? Relying on you? Don't think that you can do whatever you want as long as Aisha is here. Although we admit that we aren't as good as Aisha, but there is still a long way to go if you want to keep us here even if you can't beat her. I also want to see Aisha's strength. Is she really as strong as the rumors say? Ronan also didn't try to persuade him. He knew that there was no room for maneuver. Since Dean had the intention to kill, they could only kill their way out. Ronan believed that it wouldn't be difficult for the two of them to escape even if they couldn't defeat Dean. Oomph. Dadian raised his hand and patted the jade lion head on the table next to him. The lion head sank under the table. The sound of gears turning echoed. The door of the temple closed behind them and blocked the sunlight. The murderous aura filled the entire hall. We treat each other with respect. Envoys are not to be killed when two armies are at odds with each other. Since you don't follow the rules, I'll kill you first. Hero roared. He couldn't bear Dean any longer. He took out a sword from his sleeve and held the hilt. The hilt melted and turned into a silver liquid. The liquid wrapped around his arm and then spread to his whole body, forming a set of silver scales. At this moment, his appearance had completely changed. There were two silver horns on his head, and his eyes were dark gold with circular patterns on them. They were like the eyes of a poisonous lizard. His fingers were sharp like claws, and he looked like an angry rhinoceros. Dean didn't dare to stay and shook the bell as he saw him use the devil's body. Two sharp sword-like murderous aura shot out of Aisha's eyes. Her figure slightly trembled as she sat on the chair. Her pitch-black eyes slightly turned and fell on Ronan and Hero. Her pure black evil eyes revealed a bloodthirsty color. She slowly stood up, and an astonishing and matchless evil aura emitted from her body. She was like a demon that had escaped from its cage and emitted a torrential, murderous aura. Hero's eyelids twitched when he saw Aisha move. He knew that Aisha was dead. He thought that Dean was using her to bully others. He didn't expect Aisha to be able to move. There was a bit of fear in his heart. But after all, he was also a military god. His timidity was cut off. He roared and rushed towards Dean. Roar. Aisha also roared and pounced over with bared fangs and brandished claws. It was the same roar, but Aisha's cry was shrill and sharp like a ferocious monster. Hero and Aisha collided together. Hero turned his claws and grabbed Aisha's throat. At this moment, Aisha's body was full of flaws. This surprised him, but he didn't slow down at all. Aisha's pure black eyes suddenly shot out a demonic light in the face of this silver claw. She roared and waved her arms. Her hands suddenly rotated in a wonderful arc and grabbed Hero's elbow. She turned around and threw Hero's body to the ground with the most basic shoulder throw. The wooden floor cracked instantly and splashed countless sawdust. He took a few steps back. He couldn't participate in this battle. Hero's palms hit the ground and slid away from Aisha's hands. He returned to Ronan's side. His face was very ugly. Aisha's fighting technique was amazing. He was caught off guard and couldn't fight back. Moreover, he noticed that Aisha's strength wasn't inferior to his. But she didn't activate her demonic body. Let's go. Ronan's face was gloomy. He saw Hero retreat and immediately said, "She hasn't lost her strength. It's difficult for us to win. Let's retreat first." Hero had the same intention. After all, this was the enemy's lair. He wasn't sure if there were other dangers besides Aisha. Aisha alone was difficult to deal with. He didn't want to risk his life when he couldn't figure out the situation. The two of them decisively turned around and rushed out of the temple. Although the closed door of the temple was shining with a metallic luster, it was just a piece of waste paper in their eyes. They didn't care about it and raised their hands to hit it. Bang! Bang! With two loud bangs, the temple's door was sent flying. At the same time, two screams came from Ronan and Hero's mouth. Their bodies were stiff at the entrance of the temple. Their bodies trembled and screamed in pain. Their hair was messy. Smoke rose from their bodies. Their hair started to burn. Dean shook the bell to stop Aisha, who was ready to pounce on Aisha. At this time, the screams of the two alarmed the giant eagle resting on the square outside the temple. The monster flapped its wings and stood up from the ground. Its black eyes that were as sharp as a gem showed a look of surprise. It had been tamed and had some intelligence. It could tell that its master seemed to be in a dangerous situation, but it was not sure. After all, its master had instructed it to wait here. While the bird was feeling bewildered, Hero and Ronan's screams had stopped. However, their bodies were still frozen at the entrance of the divine hall, trembling slightly. Their hair was quickly burned away, leaving only their bald heads. The flames spread to their entire bodies, turning them into two balls of fire. Chapter 708. Dean waited for the fire to continue for a few minutes. He confirmed that the two weren't pretending to fall to the ground. Then he pulled the mechanism under the table. The lion's head popped out again. He strode forward and stimulated the snow-white demon body to protect his vital points. He came close to the two, looked down, and kicked Hero's head. Seeing no reaction, he turned around and poured the water from the wash basin next to him on the curtain next to him. Then he tore down the wet curtain and put out the flames on the two. Hero and Ronan's bodies were burnt black. There was a smell of burning flesh. However, Dean saw that their heartbeats were still slightly trembling. They were not dead. He was secretly amazed by their tenacious vitality. He picked them up and found that their bodies were burning hot. At the same time, there was a weak electric current running through his fingertips. It was the residual electricity. Luonong did not activate his demonic body. His clothes were burned, and his body was charred. His skin was torn, and his flesh was mangled. Dean called Noise, locked their tendons, and pierced their scapulae. Yes, young master. Noise's heart trembled as he looked at their charred bodies. Both of them were big shots of the inner wall. It was unbelievable that they would fall into such a miserable situation in the blink of an eye. Noise was in awe of Dean. Dean picked up the two magic tools from the ground after Noise left. One of them was a smooth dagger, and the other was a black soft armor. Without the two demon hunting tools, Ronan and Hero could not unleash the full power of their demon forms. The tendons in their limbs were enough to trap them. So many days of hard work. It's not in vain. Dean was relieved. He didn't intend to let them leave the temple safely. He was worried that the military of the inner wall was too strong. He couldn't weaken them. Naturally, he wouldn't let them go. The other side probably didn't expect that Dean would ignore the rules and attack the negotiators. It seems that the voltage of the temple needs to be increased. Two pioneers can't be electrocuted on the spot. If they were besieged by 4 or 5 people, then they would break free. Dean asked Noise to arrange people to repair the door after he came back. The temple was no longer just made of mud and bricks. The walls were covered with steel bars and electric cables. As long as the switch was turned on, the electric current would flow through the entire temple, forming a huge electric prison. Even he couldn't go in and out. The doors and windows of each exit were all made of metal, and their purpose was to conduct electricity. Dean came to the back hall of the temple and opened the secret compartment on the wall. He checked the power meter inside and was surprised. Previously, he had used up half of the temple's power reserve. In other words, with the current power reserve, they could only cope with 4 pioneers at most. It seems that both the voltage and the power reserve need to be increased. Dudian immediately made up his mind. We need to build a few more power stations. Solar panels and 1 power station are not enough. Fortunately, he had built a power station before. With the blueprints and materials, the second construction didn't take that long. Creak. At this moment, an eagle's cry came from outside the square. Dean looked up and saw that the giant eagle monster was still crawling on the square. It seemed to feel uneasy and was crying towards the temple. It doesn't know how to escape. Dean didn't expect that the stupid bird would still stay here. He guessed that it didn't dare to disobey the previous orders of the two. It could be seen that in the process of training, it had suffered inhuman torture. The psychological shadow was huge, so it didn't dare to easily disobey the master's order. Since you have lost the courage to rush to the sky, then stay on the ground. Dean didn't have the slightest mercy. His figure quickly rushed out. His whole body was wrapped in white bones. Like a white shadow, he quickly approached the giant eagle. The giant eagle's eyes emitted fierce light. It bowed its head and pecked at Dean like pecking a small bug. Dean saw the heat reaction in its body. It was only about level 40, so he could easily deal with it. When it pecked at him, he leaped up and slapped its mouth with his bony palms. The white bones in his palms turned into sharp thorns and pierced through the smooth feathers on its neck. Using the momentum, he flipped his body up and sat on its head. He hugged its neck with both hands and punched its head with his fists. The giant eagle screamed again and again, struggling desperately, shaking its head and hitting the square. The floor was broken, but no matter how Dean beat its head, although its wings kept flapping, it never dared to fly into the air. It just stayed on the ground, as if there were two shackles on its feet, firmly holding its body. Soon, the giant eagle's struggle weakened. It whined and gave up resistance. Its head fell to the ground. Dean saw that it didn't dare to leave the place. There was a strange feeling in his heart. He admired the method of taming this beast in the inner wall, but he felt a trace of sadness for it. He didn't kill it. He didn't expect to rely on his fists to make it submit to him. After all, this bird was a monster. It wasn't a horse. It couldn't be suppressed by simple strength. It would be controlled by the accumulation of fear. He planned to go back and ask Hero and Ronan about the method of controlling the giant eagle. Both of them shared the same mount. It was an extremely rare existence in the inner wall. There shouldn't be too many of them. After all, it wasn't easy to tame a ferocious monster. If it is necessary to go to the kingdom of God in the future, it would be good to ride this. But I don't know its endurance. Is it afraid of the Thunderbird? Duddian thought in his heart. He came down from the giant eagle and asked Barton to reduce the number of guards in the square by half. He didn't want to scare away the bird. Such a bird couldn't be trapped by ordinary chains. He could only rely on Hero's order to restrain it. 3 days passed in the blink of an eye. In the laboratory, Poland took out a giant black knife from a huge test tube. His face was red and his eyes flashed with blazing light. He looked at Dean. Your magic hunting tool is ready. TSK, TSK. This is the first time I've made a legendary hunter tool. The demonic cells inside are simply too beautiful. I didn't expect you to find the original body of the splitter. This hunter tool that you've forged should have perfect compatibility with your body. Chapter 709. Poland laughed as he saw Dean's arms sink. Sure enough, it's very compatible with your body. It resonates with your body. Resonance? This hunter is one with your body. It's equivalent to a part of your body. Poland explained, you will feel that it's heavy, but it's an illusion caused by the resonance. In fact, it's very light. It's lighter than a knife of the same volume, made of aluminum. Once you digest the resonance, you'll feel that it's as light as a feather. Dean was surprised as he didn't expect the hunter to have such a reaction. It was a bit like the magnetic field theory that he understood. You can try it. Poland was full of expectation. Dean looked at him. The joy in his heart gradually calmed down. I hope you didn't do anything to the hunter. You know that if something happens to me, they will kill you immediately. Poland's smile froze for a moment. Then he suddenly came to his senses and said with a wry smile, of course I wouldn't do such a stupid thing. If you don't feel at ease, then so be it. I have done it anyway. Dean expected that he wouldn't dare to make a move on the magic hunter. Not to mention that the 6 alchemists that he had arranged were not only his assistants, but also his eyes to monitor him. Can I communicate with the hunter by stimulating the power of the magic marks? Dean asked. Poland nodded. Yes, it's already a part of your body. Although there are no blood vessels, meridians, and other tissues intertwined. But as long as your body comes into contact with it and stimulates the magic marks in your body, it will automatically be stimulated. Moreover, this is your exclusive hunter. Only you can activate it. Dean understood that it was like the hunter tools that he got from Hero and Ronan. But in his hands, it was just an ordinary sword. At most, it was a little sharper, but it couldn't stimulate the potential magic power. Wham! As Dean stimulated the magic marks, he felt a strange resonance. It was as if his body suddenly had an extra hand and foot. His senses became more sensitive. At this time, he saw the giant knife in his hand slowly melt. It turned into a black liquid that wrapped around his shoulders, chest, neck, and the rest of his body. What surprised him was that when he was covered by the black liquid, he felt an unprecedented sense of clarity and comfort. It was as if his senses had been further enhanced, and he could accurately feel the changes in the temperature of the surrounding air. He could even feel the slightest flutter in the air. When the black liquid covered his nasal cavity, he subconsciously held his breath, but soon discovered that there was air flowing into his nasal cavity, just like wearing an oxygen mask. His breathing was unimpeded and unaffected. At this moment, the white bones on his body emerged, protruding from the black liquid that covered his entire body, like a white reef emerging from the deep sea. The black liquid quickly solidified and became smooth like a carapace. He looked down and saw that his hands had turned into two strange black claws. His 5 fingers were long and sharp, and his elbows were covered in a layer of black spikes. In addition, there were white bones seeping out. Together with the shell and skin that had solidified with black liquid, it looked extremely strange. Suddenly, Dean felt the cold feeling of the floor and the friction feeling. He looked back and was surprised to find that there were 3 tails growing out his back. The tails were curled up like sharp blades. They were hairless and extremely thin. They were exactly the same as the limbs of the splitter. Dean couldn't help but want to look in the mirror. "Here you go." Poland handed a mirror to Dean. His face was full of surprise as he looked at Dean. It was as if he was looking at a masterpiece. His face was full of exclamation and joy. Although he was in a bad situation at the moment, it didn't stop the joy of making a legendary hunting tool. Dean looked at his whole body in the mirror and was speechless. As he expected, his body had changed greatly. He couldn't be called a human anymore, but a Splitter cub. However, the difference between him and Splitter was that his body was in the shape of a human. His body proportion was more uniform and perfect. His muscles were outlined by the black carapace and were full of vitality. "This is my demonic body." Dean was slightly silent. He was prepared in his heart. He stimulated all the power of his magic marks. When he entered the demonic body state, he would usually change into the same type of monster as his magic marks. Aisha and Hathaway had stimulated the demonic body when they were fighting with the Corpse King. Their demonic bodies were in the posture of the dragon, but there was a little human form. Aisha said that the higher the level of evolution, the deeper the integration of the magic marks and the body will be. So the change will be greater after I use my full strength. Dean said in his heart, "I guess that I will become more like Splitter when I reach the pioneer level. How about it? Are you satisfied?" Poland smiled as he looked at Dudian. He was very satisfied with this masterpiece. Moreover, it was a legendary level magic hunter. If he was in the Institute, he would be praised by the higher-ups. His status would be greatly improved. After all, there is a huge difference between the 2 PhDs. Not bad. Dean nodded slightly. His mind moved. The black carapace quickly softened and turned into black liquid again. The black liquid retracted from his body and converged along his palm to condense into a giant sword. There are 2 ways to use the demonic hunter. The first is semi-melting and the second is full melting. Poland explained to Dean, if it's semi-melting, you can use the demonic body while still maintaining the prototype of the demonic hunter. It can be used as a combat weapon. If it's full melting, the prototype of the demonic hunter will completely disappear and integrate into your body. It will stimulate the strength of the demonic body to the greatest extent. The latter will greatly increase your speed and strength. The former will give you a tyrannical combat weapon. Dean immediately thought of the battle between Aisha and the Corpse King. At that time, the Blood Baron's sword was still in her hand. It hadn't completely integrated into her body. No matter which way you use it, the effect is almost the same. It just depends on the situation. Poland didn't wait for Dean to ask. If you want to enter a place filled with poisonous gas, then the weapon will be useless to you. You can integrate it completely and use the demonic body to the greatest extent. But if you meet an opponent with similar strength and the opponent has a magic weapon, then it's better to use semi-fusion. Dean's eyes flashed. What are the benefits of using the prototype of the demonic hunter? Why not make a separate weapon to fight? Wouldn't the demonic hunter be able to integrate completely and strengthen the demonic body? Chapter 710. Dean thought of the battle scene between Aisha and Hathaway. Both of them only used the demon hunter tool and didn't carry any other weapons. It was obvious that making another weapon to fight was completely cumbersome. The most important point was that with the current smelting technology, the metal that could be purified was limited. It was difficult to make a magic weapon comparable to the demon hunter tool. Is it possible to make two hunter tools? Dean asked Poland. Although he hadn't seen such a thing from Aisha, but he still wanted to hear Poland's answer. One person can make two hunter tools? Poland looked at him strangely. It's possible, but it's a bit wasteful. Each person's body can only accommodate one hunter tool. It's impossible to stimulate two hunter tools at the same time. So the second hunter tool can only be used as an ordinary magic weapon. Dean understood and said, "Then please use the remaining materials to forge a weapon for me." The huge body of the Great Splitter was enough to forge dozens of weapons, and its strength was not inferior to the Demon Hunter tool in his hand. After all, the main material of the Demon Hunter tool was its two main blade-like limbs. "Can you let me see my family first?" Poland asked cautiously. The main reason why he had worked so hard to make the demon hunting tool was to see his family again. He didn't doubt that Dean was lying. After all, Dean was able to capture him from the Monster Institute, so it wouldn't be difficult to find his family. "I'll let you see them after the weapon is made." Dean raised his hand and patted his shoulder. "You have done a good job this time. I will arrange a place for your family. You don't have to worry. They are living a better life than you." Poland wanted to say more, but Dean waved his hand and left the laboratory. Dean called Noyce after returning to the temple. He asked him to bring the god's marrow that was hidden in the secret chamber of the side hall. "Finally, I can step into the limitless level." Dean was excited. He didn't have to worry about the mutation of his body anymore, as he had the hunter tool to share the mutation of his body. He grabbed the god's serum, filled the syringe, and injected it into his arm. 1 vial, 2 vials, 3 vials. The god's elixir flowed into his body like a clear spring. After it entered his heart, the cool god's elixir immediately became as hot as lava and spread throughout his body. His skin was flushed red, and his veins were bulging. He looked somewhat sinister and terrifying. "Damn it, the body can't bear it if I inject too much at once." Dudian immediately stopped and held his breath. His body was blazing like a volcano. His surging blood was like magma that could erupt at any moment. Even the air he exhaled was incomparably hot. At this moment, the chill on his left hand had disappeared. It had been completely suppressed. Gulp, gulp. He seemed to be able to hear the sound of his blood surging in his body like a surging river. The scorching heat gradually subsided from his body. However, it was followed by a strange itch. It was as if countless insects were crawling on his body. He couldn't help but look around. He even used X-ray vision to check his body. He saw an amazing scene. His heart was beating wildly. Each beat pushed the diaphragm of his heart to bulge. The bones in his body seemed to be contracting slightly. The joints of the bones were getting tighter, and the shape was becoming sharper like a blade. There were no insects crawling on his body, arms, or chest. It was as if it was just an illusion. However, the feeling was real. He looked at his body and saw that his skin color was gradually darkening. It was as if his skin had lost moisture and luster. It was as if he had been exposed to the sun for a long time. Moreover, the skin was getting uglier and more wrinkled. What's going on? He was surprised. Could it be that his body couldn't bear the side effects of injecting too much at once? Although he felt uncomfortable, he was able to hold on. Could it be that his consciousness was much stronger than his body? Soon he knew the reason. His skin was wrinkled. There were a few places where his skin was broken. However, there was no blood flowing out. Instead, he could see a faint pink color. He lifted his hand and tore it off. He found that under the wrinkled skin was a new pink skin. It was warm and tender. There was no dust on it. It was like the skin of a baby. He was surprised that he had shed his skin. After a long time, all kinds of strange sensations in his body gradually disappeared. Dean's mind also calmed down. He rubbed off the dead skin and found that his whole body had a comfortable feeling. It was like breathing the fresh air in the morning. Every part of his body was breathing, and his senses had become more sensitive than before. It was a bit like the feeling after entering the devil world. Have I broken through to the limitless level? Dean thought. He was a half-step limitless level. With the help of Aisha, he was able to control his body to the critical point between the hunter and limitless level. Now that he had injected God's marrow again, it didn't make sense for him to break through to the limitless level. I feel several times stronger than before. I don't know if I will be stronger after activating the devil's world. Dean's eyes lit up. He grabbed the sword and stimulated the power of the magic mark on his chest. Devil's body. The sword turned into black mucus and covered his whole body. His fingers were like claws and covered with black scales. The black mucus hardened and turned into an iron-like black armor. There were a few sharp horns of different lengths on top of his head. These horns seemed to be able to sense the temperature and humidity of his surroundings, making his senses even more sensitive. The broken wings on his back also appeared at this moment, but they were already complete wings, like two huge black blades. Behind him, a few sharp blade-like tails slapped against the ground, easily cutting through the floorboards as if they were mud. Dean was like a humanoid beast sitting on the chair. His black eyes had turned dark gold. There was a circle of cold gold around his pupils. He was as cold and ruthless as a monster. Huh, have they woken up? Dean saw that Hero and Ronan, who were locked in the underground prison of Utopo Mountain, had woken up. The layers of soil under his feet couldn't block his sight. He could even see their chests and hearts. The penetrating power of his eyes was countless times stronger than before. Surprised, he withdrew his gaze and took a small step forward. With a swoosh, he disappeared like a hurricane. Even the snow-white paper on the table fluttered in the wind. His body appeared outside the square in a flash, standing beside the giant eagle. Chapter 711. Dean glanced at it. When he had approached it, it had fiercely pounced on him, treating him like a worm and ready to eat him. But now it was too scared to approach him. The chains on its feet rattled. If it were not firmly tied to the boulder, it would have flown into the air. It seems that this demonic body has completely concealed the smell of a human. It's no different from a monster. Dean thought in his heart, if it were a monster, it would be normal to scare this giant eagle. After all, his physique was much stronger than this ferocious bird. Beasts and monsters had far more accurate judgment in this regard than humans. They could distinguish what was a prey and what was a predator. He ignored the giant eagle and quickly performed a set of punches on the square. Bang! Bang! The air seemed to explode in front of his fists. His body created a strong wind as he moved. Wherever he passed, the sand and dust on the ground would give way. He jumped in front of a towering ancient tree outside the square and raised his hand to grab it. With a tearing sound, half of the bark of the ancient tree was forcibly pulled out by him. Dean let go of his hand and retreated. He put away the power of the magic marks. The demon hunter covering his body gradually condensed and turned into a giant sword. The feeling of having a demonic body is really different from before. Dean's eyes flashed. Although there was no opponent to spar with him and test his strength, through the previous display, he could roughly feel the strength in his body. It was stronger than all the frontiersmen he had seen. However, compared with the pioneers, there was still a big gap. Regardless of whether it was Amino, Hero, Ronan, or the others, the strength and speed that they displayed were all above his. Furthermore, they all had excellent close-quarters combat techniques. If he were to really fight them, he would still be unable to match them, but it was possible for him to protect himself and escape. It was quite amazing to be able to do this. It should be known that most of the people who could become pioneers had magic marks in their body. The lowest magic mark was a rare one, second only to the legendary level. However, he was only at the early stage of the frontiersman. If it was any other frontiersman, even if they were talented, they would not be able to withstand a single blow from a pioneer. They would be as humble as an ant. All of this was due to the huge increase brought by his legendary deified magic mark. His physique was much stronger than that of a rare magic mark of the same level. In addition to his tyrannical physique, Dean felt that his combat ability was far more tyrannical than before. The benefit to the magic body fully played the role of his legendary magic mark. When he used his fists and feet, he felt extraordinarily free, as if he had broken free from all shackles. Even when he made actions that were completely unimaginable in the past, it was still very easy. When he retracted his demonic body, he felt like he was trapped in a sturdy tortoise shell. He felt uncomfortable all over. He had all his strength, but nowhere to use it. But if he had experienced the sweetness of the demonic body, he would not have such a feeling at all. The so-called extravagance was easy, but the simplicity was difficult. He could only adapt to this feeling. After all, entering the demonic body state with the help of the magic hunter consumed a lot of physical energy. Unlike other people who had directly evolved their body into the demonic body, they could maintain the demonic body state at any time, and they could only maintain the demonic body state without any additional consumption. But entering the demonic body through the magic hunter consumed a huge amount of internal energy. At this moment, he felt a burst of hunger in his stomach. There is sacrifice and there is gain. God is still fair. Dean thought in his heart. He did not build the magic hunter and directly evolve his body into the demonic form. Obviously, he was stronger and more advantageous in a protracted war. But he abandoned the human society and could only live in the shadow of the giant wall. He was spurned and feared. If he lived like this for a long time, it was hard to guarantee that he would not go crazy. Dean went back to the temple and asked Noise to get food and the liquor he brewed. He was ready to supplement the consumption of his body. The cold in his frozen left arm spread to his left chest as the hunger hit him. If it was for a long time, his heart would be frozen and his life would be in danger. The liquor he brewed didn't disappoint him. Every time he took a sip, it would dispel a lot of the cold and restore his body's warmth. I'll take a break before injecting God's marrows. Dean temporarily put away the God's marrows on the table. Although he had a large amount of God's marrows in hand, he couldn't inject them all at once. He needed to do it step by step. But he estimated that he would use up the God's marrows in 10 days to half a month if he used up all the God's marrows. He didn't know if his physique would be able to break through the pioneer's realm by then. He believed that his combat ability would surpass Hero, Ronan, and the others if he could reach that step. He would be able to attack the inner wall at that time with the help of the lightning god's technique. 7 or 8 people were sitting in a circle in the inner wall. The old man who was sitting in the main seat was tall and sturdy. His hair was gray, but his body didn't have the slightest hunch. Instead, his muscles were bulging. There were several people sitting in front of him. One of them had a gauze wrapped around his arm. His face was pale and haggard. It seemed that he was seriously injured. Everyone, the monastery is responsible for assisting the military to clean up all the infected zombies in the cities. We will cooperate with them to build the isolation zone. The dean said in a deep voice. It is said that the undeads of pioneer level have appeared in Carmen, Vincent, and Big Bulin. The military has sent the god of war to kill them. Which one of you is willing to represent the monastery? Everyone looked at each other in silence. Humph! The dean slapped the table. Don't you usually talk a lot? Why are you mute at the critical moment? Do you want me to assign you personally? Hearing this, several people's expressions changed. The old man with the gauze in his hand said carefully, Dean, I was injured when I went to clean up the zombies in Kilo City not long ago. If I were to fight with the explorers, I'm afraid. The dean looked at him. You don't need to go. I don't want to add another undeads to the list. Dean, many people in our branch have been infected. I'm afraid that we don't have time. Another person whispered. When the others saw this, they immediately complained. It seems that I really have to assign you. The dean sneered and pointed out 3 names. 1 city each. Pick one for yourselves. There's no room for discussion. You must arrive before moonrise. If you don't go, I will directly hand you over to the higher-ups." The three people who were named looked at each other. They could only agree. "It's an emergency. You three go first. The others tell me about the situation in your branch." The three of them immediately got up and left. You're tuning in to the Warrior Lore YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.